Beneath the burning sun and endless sands of the Egyptian desert lies a legacy carved in stone, older than memory and stranger than myth. For over 4,000 years, the monuments of ancient Egypt have stood in silence, watching empires rise and fall, enduring the slow erosion of time. And yet, in their silence, they whisper questions that modern science still cannot answer. How did a civilization with primitive tools construct megalithic structures with mathematical precision? Why do some tombs remain untouched, their secrets sealed behind impossibly engineered doors? And what knowledge, what forgotten science or purpose was encoded into these monuments, aligned perfectly with the stars? These are not tales of magic or legend. These are anomalies etched into real stone, documented by archaeologists, debated by historians, and feared by those who don't want to question what we think we know. Because when it comes to ancient Egypt, not everything adds up, and some answers might change history itself. So sit back, relax, and let's dive deep into the sand-swept mysteries of a world that refuses to be fully understood. Welcome to Ancient Egypt, mysteries that cannot be explained. The sun hangs low over the horizon, casting long golden shadows across an ocean of sand. The wind whispers through empty wadis and crumbling rock outcrops, stirring ancient dust that has not been disturbed for centuries. This is Egypt's western desert, a vast and silent expanse stretching from the fertile Nile Valley to the borders of Libya. To the untrained eye, it appears lifeless, barren. But beneath its scorched surface, some believe, lie the remnants of something far older than the pyramids. A forgotten city, a hidden world. In the farthest reaches of this desert lies the Gilf Kebir Plateau, an enormous sandstone massif rising from the desert floor like the ruins of a drowned continent. It is one of the most remote and inhospitable parts of Egypt, accessible only by long expeditions and only to those who can endure its harshness. And yet, it is here, in this isolated place, that a mystery has quietly endured for decades. In the 1930s, during a British exploration of the region, Hungarian explorer Laszlo Almasi, a figure later fictionalized in The English Patient, stumbled upon something extraordinary. Strange rock art deep inside a cave he called the Cave of the Swimmers. The faded paintings, depicting human-like figures in fluid, floating poses, suggested a radically different past. How could such imagery exist in what is now one of the driest places on Earth? Was this region once fertile, even aquatic? Indeed, geological and climatological studies have since confirmed that thousands of years ago, before the rise of dynastic Egypt, this desert was green. Around 9,000 to 6,000 BC, the region experienced a period of increased rainfall and vegetation, part of what scientists now refer to as the African Humid Period. Lakes, rivers, and savannas once flourished here, supporting human life, wild animals, and even agriculture. And where there is sustained human presence, cities, or at least large, organized settlements, often follow. But here is where the mystery deepens. Over the years, satellite imaging and ground-penetrating radar have revealed strange anomalies beneath the sand in parts of the western desert. Patterns too geometric to be natural, suggestive of structures or walls. Some researchers point to unusual alignments of subsurface features near Dakhla Oasis and Pharaoh, where legends persist among the Bedouins of old cities swallowed by the dunes. These anomalies remain unexcavated, either too remote, too difficult, or too politically sensitive to explore further. Could these truly be remnants of an unknown settlement? If so, who built them, and why? Mainstream archaeologists caution against overinterpretation. They argue that what appears geometric can often be the product of natural sedimentation, ancient dry riverbeds, or simply wishful thinking projected onto satellite images. And yet, they do not deny that much of the Western Desert remains completely unexplored. In recent decades, a more radical theory has emerged, one that skirts the edges of accepted history. It proposes that the Western Desert may conceal the ruins of a pre-dynastic civilization, one that predates the Nile Valley cultures by thousands of years. Some even suggest that the founders of ancient Egyptian civilization may have migrated from this forgotten interior, bringing with them advanced knowledge of astronomy, agriculture, and construction. Curiously, many of the earliest myths of Egypt speak of a time before the pharaohs, an era ruled by gods and semi-divine beings. The so-called Zep-Tepi, or First Time, described in temple inscriptions, tells of a golden age when order was brought to a chaotic land. Could these stories be distorted memories of an older, lost society? One buried beneath the sands, erased by time and the shifting climate? Al-Masih himself believed the desert once held a secret older than Egypt and devoted much of his life to finding it. He was not alone. In 2007, a joint Egyptian-American team led by archaeologist Dr. Fekri Hassan investigated desert basins near Bir Kisiba, unearthing stone tools, hearths, and even hints of water management systems. These findings push back the timeline of organized activity in the Western Desert by thousands of years. But a city, a true city with walls, roads, and buildings, that remains elusive. What makes this mystery so compelling is the silence surrounding it. Unlike the Valley of the Kings or the temples of Karnak, the Western Desert has not been reshaped by centuries of excavation, tourism, or narrative. It resists easy answers. Each expedition yields fragments, traces of human presence, artistic expression, environmental shifts, but no clear story. And perhaps that is what draws us in. The idea that beneath miles of shifting sand lies a chapter of human history yet unread. That somewhere out there, hidden in the folds of time, is a place that could change everything we know about the origins of civilization in Africa. Humanity, of ourselves. For now, the wind continues to sweep across the plateau, whispering secrets we are not yet ready to hear. The desert holds its silence, but not forever. And so we wonder, what still sleeps beneath the dunes of the Western Desert? And who, if anyone, will be the first to wake it? The desert winds fade as we leave the emptiness of Egypt's western expanse behind and travel east, toward the Nile once more, toward a place long revered by the ancients as the threshold between worlds. Nestled quietly on the west bank of the Nile, in the modern governorate of Sohag, lies Abydos, one of the oldest and most sacred sites in all of ancient Egypt. Surrounded by crumbling cliffs and scorched plains, it was once the spiritual heart of the nation, the legendary burial ground of Osiris, god of the afterlife. For millennia, pharaohs and priests made pilgrimages here to honor the mysteries of death and rebirth. But beyond its temples and tombs, beneath its sandstone layers, something else lies hidden. Something massive. Something still not fully understood. Beneath the Temple of Seti I, a grand limestone structure begun around 1290 BC, archaeologists have discovered a subterranean network unlike anything else in Egypt. Known today as the Osiris, this enigmatic structure is often overshadowed by more famous monuments. Yet, to those who study it closely, it poses questions that ripple through the very foundations of Egyptology. The Osiris is not visible from the temple above. To reach it, one must descend deep into the ground. There, surrounded by water and silence, stand colossal granite blocks, some weighing more than 100 tons. They form a series of chambers and pillars, arranged with a symmetry that suggests careful planning, perhaps even advanced geometry. The floor lies far below the modern surface level, so deep, in fact, that it appears the temple was built on top of the older structure, not as part of a single design. This is where the mystery begins. Traditional scholars date the Osirian to the reign of Seti I, suggesting it was conceived as a symbolic tomb for Osiris. But the construction tells a different story. The granite used here comes from Aswan, over 100 miles to the south, raising immediate logistical questions. How did the ancient builders transport and lower these massive stones with such precision? Why bury such effort underground, where few could witness its grandeur? Even more perplexing, the architectural style of the Osirian doesn't match that of Seti's temple or any known New Kingdom monument. It is stark, almost primal. Massive blocks, minimal ornamentation, megalithic in scale and intent. It bears more resemblance to the Valley Temple of Khafra at Giza than to anything from the 19th dynasty. Could the Osirian be older than we think? Some Egyptologists have proposed just that the structure predates Seti's temple by centuries, perhaps even millennia, and that Seti merely discovered it and incorporated it into his sacred complex. This idea finds support in the writings of Flinders Petrie, the pioneering British archaeologist who first studied the site in the early 20th century. Petrie noted that the Osirian appeared to be cut into the ground, with no evidence that it had ever been fully visible above it. He also pointed to the water table. It fills naturally with groundwater even today, suggesting that the builders either underestimated this challenge or had a purpose for the water itself. A symbolic underworld? A literal gateway to the realm of the dead? Or something else entirely? Inscriptions are scarce. Unlike other Egyptian tombs and temples, the Osirian is nearly devoid of hieroglyphs. What little there is, some cartouches of Seti I, seem to have been added after construction. This lack of documentation is deeply unusual for a culture that carved its history onto every available surface. And so the questions deepen. Could this be a relic from a forgotten chapter of Egyptian prehistory? Some researchers have speculated that the Osirian might be a surviving fragment of an advanced civilization that existed long before the dynastic era, perhaps as far back as 10,000 BC, when the climate of the Nile region was dramatically different. These fringe theories draw comparisons to other ancient anomalies, such as the Sphinx's debated erosion patterns, or the unexplainable precision of certain megalithic sites around the world. Others believe it may have been part of a lost mystery school, a place of ritual initiation accessible only to the priesthood. The surrounding water, the darkness, the sense of descent, all could have symbolized the death and rebirth of the soul. In this reading, the Osirian wasn't a tomb at all, but a metaphysical chamber designed to awaken something within the initiate. Still others see in its structure a kind of map, an encoded diagram of cosmological ideas, or a sacred machine aligned with stars, seasons, or even forgotten energies of the earth itself. Of course, mainstream scholars caution against these interpretations. They urge a more conservative view, that the Osirian was a symbolic cenotaph, built late in Egyptian history, and that its architectural oddities can be explained by religious intent, not lost civilizations. But even they acknowledge the structure's uniqueness. Nothing else like it has been found, not in Abydos, not anywhere. And the fact remains, we still don't fully understand how it was built. The logistics of cutting, transporting, and placing such immense stones without iron tools, pulleys, or wheeled vehicles remains a puzzle. No ancient records detail the process. No nearby quarries show signs of the stone's origin. The construction appears complete and deliberate, and yet its story is missing. Today, the Osirian rests in partial obscurity, submerged in still water, watched over by crumbling ruins and the occasional visitor. But to those who stand within its depths, surrounded by its silent giants of stone, one question seems to echo louder than all the rest. Why? Why build this hidden chamber so deep beneath the sands of Abydos? Why the scale, the secrecy, the enduring silence? And why does it feel older than it should? Perhaps the answers lie not in what we can prove, but in what we're still willing to imagine. And so the Osirian remains, half seen, half understood, a riddle carved in stone, waiting patiently for the world to ask the right question. As we emerge from the subterranean shadows of the Osirian, our journey through Egypt's enduring enigmas takes us farther north, to the windswept sands just west of modern-day Cairo. Here, on the arid plateau of Saqqara, lies another silent riddle, one hidden deep beneath the surface, locked away in stone chambers few have seen and fewer understand. Beneath the ancient necropolis of Saqqara, tucked into a narrow, rock-cut passageway, lies a place known simply as the Serapeum. Discovered in the 1850s by French archaeologist Auguste Mariette, the site is carved into the bedrock itself, a long, dark corridor stretching into the earth, lined with alcoves carved with geometric precision. But it is what those alcoves contain that has captured the fascination of scholars, engineers, and seekers alike for over a century. Resting in these chambers are massive black granite sarcophagi, each weighing an estimated 70 to 100 tons, including their perfectly fitting lids. There are over 20 of them, monolithic boxes of smooth, dark stone, polished to a mirror-like finish and carved with an accuracy that modern toolmakers struggle to replicate. Each box stands over 7 feet tall and nearly as wide, often larger than the passages themselves, begging the obvious question: how were they moved into place? Conventional Egyptology offers an explanation rooted in ritual and tradition. The Serapeum, they say, was the final resting place of the Apis bulls, sacred animals believed to be earthly manifestations of the god Ptah. When an Apis bull died, it was embalmed and buried with great ceremony, often in its own granite sarcophagus. The practice dates back to at least 1400 BC and was centered around the cult of Serapis, a Greco-Egyptian fusion deity venerated during the Ptolemaic period. But almost immediately, questions began to emerge. Why construct such impossibly large containers for animal burials? Why use granite, a stone harder than steel, for objects destined to be sealed and never seen again? And why polish and align them with such extraordinary precision, when simple burial boxes would have sufficed for ceremonial needs? Some of the sarcophagi bear inscriptions, yes, hieroglyphic markings dedicated to individual Apis bulls, identifying the pharaohs under whom they died. But others are completely blank. No names, no dedications, no signs of ever having been used. Were they left unfinished? Or were they never intended for animals at all? Even stranger are the properties of the boxes themselves. Each is carved from a single block of Aswan granite, or in some cases, rose quartzite, both quarried hundreds of miles to the south. The interior surfaces are smooth and uniform, with 90-degree angles that suggest machine-level tolerances. Engineers who have examined them, outside the boundaries of traditional archaeology, have remarked on the technical sophistication required to achieve such finishes. Could copper chisels and pounding stones, the standard tools of the time, truly account for such work? Inside the Serapeum, the silence is profound. The air feels denser, charged. Many who visit describe an almost palpable stillness, broken only by the crunch of footsteps and the weight of their own breath. The lighting is dim, artificial, revealing only parts of the mystery at a time. One massive black box after another, looming like tombs for giants. And yet, no human remains have ever been found inside. Were these sarcophagi ever used at all? If so, for what? And by whom? Mainstream scholars urge caution, attributing the scale of the Serapeum to symbolic grandeur, religious devotion, and the extraordinary manpower of ancient Egypt. They point to the cultural significance of the Apis cult and the Egyptian tendency to monumentalize the sacred. And while that may explain the presence of some boxes, it does little to account for the others, those without inscriptions, seemingly unused, and exhibiting technical features that defy easy explanation. It is here that more speculative ideas begin to stir. Some suggest that the boxes were not sarcophagi at all, but something else entirely. Perhaps energy storage devices, resonance chambers, or even part of a now-lost technological system. These theories remain controversial, often dismissed by academics, but they persist due to one haunting truth. We still do not fully understand how they were made. Could they have been constructed using methods now lost to time? Was there once a form of craftsmanship, an artisan knowledge capable of manipulating stone in ways we can no longer replicate? Or are we simply underestimating the ingenuity and skill of the ancient Egyptians? It is tempting to reach for answers, to impose modern concepts on ancient mysteries. But the black boxes of the Serapeum resist easy categorization. They do not fit neatly into our narratives of linear progress or simple ritual. They seem to suggest something more, something layered and elusive, half explained and half buried in the silence of stone. Today, the Serapeum is partially open to the public, yet its enigma remains undisturbed. The black boxes sit in place, as they have for thousands of years, immovable, unyielding, untouched by time. We pass by them, we photograph them, we measure their angles and estimate their weight, but we do not yet understand them. And so the question lingers. Were these immense vessels truly built for bulls? Or do they hint at a forgotten purpose, buried beneath the sands of time, waiting to be rediscovered? As we continue deeper into Egypt's unresolved past, the Serapeum stands as a quiet challenge, a reminder that not all mysteries lie in plain sight, and that some of the most compelling truths may be hiding in the darkness, just beyond the reach of what we think we know. The morning sun rises slowly over the Giza Plateau, casting long shadows across the timeless silhouettes of three pyramids. Towering above them all, the Great Pyramid of Khufu looms in stillness, its weathered limestone blocks bearing witness to over 4,500 years of human history, speculation, and awe. It is the only surviving wonder of the ancient world, and yet it remains one of the least understood. For centuries, explorers, scholars, and mystics have been drawn to the Great Pyramid, not only because of its sheer size and antiquity, but because it refuses to give up all its secrets. Hidden within its stone mass, some 5.75 million tons of limestone and granite, are a series of chambers and passageways, some known, some still undiscovered. And in recent years, one of the most tantalizing discoveries of all has reignited debate about what may still lie within this ancient monument. A hidden chamber, concealed above the Grand Gallery, untouched since the pyramid's construction, and never before seen by human eyes. The discovery was not made through excavation or accident, but through the use of cosmic ray muon imaging, a non-invasive scanning technique capable of detecting voids in solid structures. In 2017, the International Scan Pyramids Project announced the presence of a large, previously unknown space within the Great Pyramid, located roughly 70 feet above ground level, near the heart of the structure. It was dubbed the Big Void. Roughly 100 feet long, the chamber's shape and purpose remain uncertain. It is not directly connected to any known corridor. There is no visible entrance, no accessible passage, no indication in ancient texts of its existence. And yet, the technology confirms it is there, a significant cavity within a monument thought to have been thoroughly studied. Why was this space created? And more importantly, what, if anything, does it contain? Mainstream Egyptologists urge caution. They suggest the void may simply be a relieving chamber, a space left intentionally to reduce weight and structural pressure on the grand gallery below. Similar cavities exist above the king's chamber, stacked granite blocks placed deliberately to prevent collapse. From this perspective, the big void may be an architectural necessity, not a hidden room. And yet, there are reasons to doubt that explanation. Unlike the smaller relieving spaces directly above the king's chamber, which are stacked and well documented, the newly discovered void is vast and unlike anything else found inside the pyramid. It aligns almost perfectly with the central axis, and its sheer size, large enough to fit a commercial airliner wing, raises questions about why such a massive cavity would have been necessary, especially if simpler techniques were already in use elsewhere in the pyramid. Some researchers propose that the void could be a hidden chamber, deliberately concealed during construction, perhaps to protect something sacred or secret. A cache of ritual objects? A symbolic void meant to represent the Duat, the ancient Egyptian underworld? Or even the long-rumored Hall of Records, said by fringe theorists to contain lost knowledge from a forgotten age? That last idea, largely dismissed by mainstream scholars, originates from legends that predate the pyramid's rediscovery in the modern era. Ancient Arab texts, Greek accounts, and more recent esoteric writings speak of hidden knowledge sealed within the Great Pyramid, locked away by its builders to be uncovered only when the world is ready. Most archaeologists view such stories as symbolic rather than literal, but the fact that a chamber does exist, exactly where some of these legends suggested, has led many to re-examine them with renewed curiosity. Of course, there is also the question of access. As of now, no tunnel, shaft, or crawl space has been found that leads to the big void. It remains unreachable, observable only through remote imaging. Engineers have proposed using robotic drones or fiber optic probes to investigate further, but concerns over preserving the integrity of the structure and navigating Egypt's strict antiquities regulations have slowed progress. For now, we are left with questions, and a space that is undeniably there, but silent. Was the chamber left empty by design, or does it house something that has remained undisturbed for thousands of years? If it is a construction feature, why is it so unlike all others? If it is ceremonial or symbolic, what belief system gave rise to such secrecy? Some point to the extraordinary planning and alignment of the pyramid itself. The fact that its base is nearly perfectly square, its sides aligned almost exactly with the cardinal points, and its proportions resonant with mathematical constants. These features suggest not only advanced architectural knowledge, but a worldview in which geometry, cosmology, and the afterlife were deeply intertwined. Could the hidden chamber, then, be more than just empty space? Could it be a message encoded in stone, awaiting interpretation? As we stand once more at the foot of the Great Pyramid, it's easy to be overwhelmed by its scale. But it is what lies within, out of view, out of reach, that stirs something deeper. A sense that the ancients knew more than we give them credit for. That they built not only for kings and gods, but for something else. Something they wanted us to find, eventually. And so, the Great Pyramid remains a riddle, its most enigmatic feature still sealed, still watching from above the Grand Gallery. We can scan it, we can model it, we can speculate, but until we find a way to look inside, the chamber will remain a silent guardian of its own secret. What waits within the big void? Is it nothing at all? Or is it something that could forever change how we understand Egypt's greatest monument? For now, the stone keeps its silence, and we are left to wonder. As we leave the hidden chamber of the Great Pyramid behind, our journey continues, returning once more to the ancient burial grounds of Saqqara. Here, amid crumbling tombs and wind-blown sand, where countless relics of Egypt's sacred past have been uncovered, a single wooden artifact, small, unassuming, has stirred some of the most unexpected questions of all. Discovered in 1898 within a tomb near the Pyramid of Djedefre, the object measures just over 7 inches long. Crafted from lightweight sycamore wood, it resembles a bird in flight, wings outstretched, tail downward, head upright. But there is something unusual about it, something that sets it apart from the many figurines and ritual objects found across ancient Egypt. Known today as the Saqqara Bird, this artifact is officially classified as a model of a bird, possibly symbolic, possibly ceremonial. It now resides in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, resting behind glass among thousands of other ancient remnants. At first glance, it might seem ordinary, perhaps even overlooked. But a closer inspection reveals features that don't quite fit within the framework of known Egyptian symbolism. The wings are straight and slightly swept, not curved like those of typical bird statues. The body is symmetrical. There is no detailed carving of feathers or eyes, only a smoothed form, aerodynamic in its simplicity. Most notably, the tail is vertical, not horizontal as one would expect from a bird replica. To a trained eye, it looks less like an animal and more like a design, something that might cut through the air. It was this realization that sparked deeper investigation. In the 1960s, an engineer named Dr. Khalil Messiha, examining the object more carefully, proposed a radical theory. The Saqqara Bird was not just a toy or a ceremonial carving, it was a model glider. He argued that its proportions, balance, and design bore striking resemblance to those of modern aerodynamic principles. Could it be, he asked, that the ancient Egyptians had knowledge of flight, or at least of flight mechanics, long before such concepts were formally studied? Mainstream Egyptologists have responded with skepticism. They maintain that the object likely held religious or symbolic meaning, possibly connected to Ba, the ancient Egyptian concept of the soul often represented as a bird with a human head. Wooden bird figures have been found in various tombs, often associated with themes of transformation, ascension, or spiritual movement. From this perspective, the Saqqara Bird is a metaphysical symbol, not a mechanical prototype. But the mystery deepens when attempts are made to recreate it. In multiple experiments over the past decades, engineers and aviation enthusiasts have built scaled versions of the Saqqara Bird using modern materials. In some tests, with slight modifications, such as the addition of a stabilizing horizontal tailplane, the models have successfully glided through the air. This has led some to speculate that the original might have been a teaching tool, a model based on lost principles, or even a representation of something that once existed full scale. Skeptics point out that no evidence of ancient flying machines, no blueprints, no written records, no large-scale remains have ever been found. And they are right. Egypt's vast record of inscriptions and carvings makes no mention of air travel. The Saqqara Bird, if it were truly aerodynamic, would be a complete anomaly, an isolated fragment without context. But could it represent something else? A myth, perhaps, or a dream? Some have theorized that the object might be part of a lost artistic or spiritual tradition, one in which the soul's ascent to the heavens was imagined not in mythic abstraction, but in literal mechanical metaphor. After all, the Egyptians believed in the Ka and Ba, energies that left the body at death and took flight into the afterlife. Perhaps the bird was not intended to fly in this world, but in the next. Others have gone further, linking the Saqqara Bird to ancient legends of divine beings who came from the sky, or to Atlantean-style theories about prehistoric civilizations with advanced technologies lost to time. These ideas remain speculative, unsupported by hard evidence, but they continue to capture the imagination of those drawn to Egypt's more enigmatic corners. Still, it is important to remember the Saqqara Bird is real. It is not a myth, not a hoax. It exists, crafted by human hands over 2,000 years ago during the Ptolemaic period, and placed carefully within a tomb as part of the eternal journey of the soul. Its proportions, its form, and its unanswered questions are tangible. Whether it is a symbolic relic or a misunderstood piece of engineering, it challenges us to consider just how much we assume about the past, and how little we truly know. Why was the object made with such aerodynamic balance? Was it simply an accident of form? Or does it hint at knowledge or intention that no longer fits our narrative of what ancient Egypt was? And if this small wooden bird, buried and forgotten beneath centuries of sand, could prompt such inquiry, what else might still lie hidden, waiting to disrupt our carefully drawn timelines? As we continue our journey into the unexplained, the Saqqara Bird stands as a quiet enigma, small in size, yet vast in implication. It invites us not to leap to conclusions, but to look again, more closely, more carefully, and to ask, as always, what else have we missed? As we leave behind the delicate curves of the Saqqara Bird carved in wood and cloaked in mystery, our journey returns once more to the sacred sands of Abydos, an ancient city older than most of Egypt's recorded history. Here, deep within the crumbling yet majestic temple of Seti Thurs, we find not a relic, but an inscription. Etched in stone, high upon a columned ceiling, it has drawn the attention of scholars, tourists, and theorists alike. And yet, it is not what the glyphs say that provokes wonder, but what they seem to show. At first glance, the hieroglyphs in question might appear unremarkable, just one panel among many in this expansive temple dedicated to Osiris, the god of resurrection. But a closer look reveals a peculiar and much debated detail. Carved into the stone architrave above a doorway is a series of overlapping glyphs that, some say, bear an uncanny resemblance to modern flying machines. To the eye untrained in hieroglyphics, one shape appears startlingly similar to a helicopter: rotor blades, a cockpit, even a tail section. Beside it, others see what looks like a submarine, an aeroplane, and other unfamiliar mechanical forms. These images have become collectively known as the Abydos helicopter glyphs. Photographs of the carvings have circulated widely, sparking global debate and fueling a wave of interpretations, ranging from the archaeological to the otherworldly. Could these images truly depict flying machines? If so, how could they appear in a temple constructed more than 3,000 years ago during the reign of Seti Thurs in the 13th century BC? Mainstream Egyptologists offer a grounded explanation, one that rests not on ancient astronauts or lost technology, but on a well-documented phenomenon known as palimpsest. According to this view, the glyphs are the result of two overlapping inscriptions. Over time, as dynasties changed and pharaohs reasserted their authority, older carvings were sometimes filled in or recarved with new text. In this case, the original inscription by Seti Thurs was later modified by his son, Ramses II, and the combination of partially erased hieroglyphs and newer ones produced a layered coincidental image, an unintentional optical illusion. To those fluent in hieroglyphic writing, the distorted glyphs can be traced back to legitimate symbols, each with a mundane, phonetic, or symbolic meaning. The helicopter, they say, is not a helicopter at all, but a layered series of phonetic symbols whose altered outlines just happen to resemble modern machinery. And yet, coincidence can be a strange and powerful thing. How likely is it that a random overlap of ancient symbols would so closely resemble modern vehicles? The alignment, the proportions, the visual symmetry, each adds a layer of complexity that fuels ongoing curiosity. Some point out that palimpsest errors are common, but few, if any, produce imagery this specific. To the layperson, the resemblance is difficult to ignore. This has opened the door to more speculative theories. Some researchers, working on the fringes of accepted archaeology, suggest that the glyphs might reflect lost knowledge, perhaps inherited from a forgotten civilization whose understanding of engineering or flight was far more advanced than we currently believe. Others go further still, proposing that these images are the result of contact with beings from beyond Earth, visitors whose machines were remembered and mythologized in temple art. These ideas remain controversial. There is no evidence, no blueprints, no artifacts, no records of any flying machines in ancient Egypt. The civilization left behind an immense body of texts, inscriptions, and tools, none of which describe flight in a literal or mechanical sense. But still, the question lingers. What did the ancients see? What did they imagine? And how did they express it? It is worth noting that ancient Egyptian art was deeply symbolic. What we perceive as literal may have held layered, metaphorical meaning to its creators. Birds symbolized freedom of the soul. Boats symbolized cosmic journeys. Might the shapes we see in the Abydos glyphs be reflections of ideas, not machines? Representations of movement, transformation, or divine travel across realms? Or could they be something more? Adding to the intrigue is the context in which these glyphs appear. The Temple of Seti I is one of the most intricate and deeply symbolic structures in Egypt. Its halls are filled with depictions of resurrection, cosmic balance, and transitions between life and death. It is a place where the boundaries between myth and reality blur, where gods walk beside kings and time itself is carved in stone. Within such a setting, is it impossible to believe that something extraordinary, something not yet understood, might have been preserved? The stone, after all, does not explain itself. It merely endures. Today, the Abydos helicopter glyphs remain exactly where they've always been, high above the temple floor, exposed to wind, time, and questions. Researchers still debate, photographs still circulate, and visitors, both curious and skeptical, crane their necks upward and wonder. Was this truly a mistake of overlapping carvings? A palimpsest misread by modern minds desperate for mystery? Or was it something more deliberate, an echo of forgotten knowledge encoded in stone, waiting for the right moment to be seen? In the shifting light of Abydos, it's hard to say. But as long as the glyphs remain etched in place, unaltered and unexplained, the mystery endures, a quiet whisper from the past, asking us not for belief, but for attention. What did the ancients know? And how much of it still waits to be uncovered, just out of reach, hidden in plain sight? Beneath the golden haze of the Giza Plateau, where time hangs thick in the air and every stone seems to echo with secrets, the ancient pyramids rise, not only as monuments of stone and geometry, but as gateways into enigmas still unfolding. And while the eye is drawn upward to their soaring forms, it is what might lie beneath them, hidden deep in the bedrock, that now captures the curiosity of those willing to look beyond the visible. In recent decades, a quiet but growing line of inquiry has emerged, not centered on tombs or treasures, but on the possibility of liquid mercury beneath the pyramids of Egypt. A substance mysterious in itself, heavy, toxic, reflective, ancient, a material revered in myth and cloaked in alchemical lore. Could there be rivers of mercury, or reservoirs of it, flowing silently in the dark beneath these ancient structures? It might seem far-fetched, but the idea is not without precedent. In 2013, archaeologists in Teotihuacan, Mexico, discovered liquid mercury in a sealed tunnel beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, a chamber untouched for nearly 2,000 years. The find baffled researchers. Mercury has no known ceremonial purpose in Mesoamerican culture, and yet it had been deliberately placed, perhaps as a symbolic underworld river meant to guide the soul in death. This discovery has prompted a reconsideration of Mercury's place in the ancient world, not just as a rare and dangerous element, but as something possibly known and utilized long before modern chemistry. So, what of Egypt? Whispers of Mercury in Egyptian structures, particularly under the Great Pyramid of Khufu, have surfaced in both fringe literature and scientific speculation. Though no Mercury has yet been publicly confirmed beneath Giza, there are curious hints. Thermal anomalies detected on the eastern side of the Great Pyramid, unexplained voids beneath the structure identified by radar and muon imaging, and ancient texts, both Egyptian and foreign, that speak of secret chambers and flowing metal deep underground. Among them are enigmatic references in Arabic manuscripts, compiled long after the Old Kingdom era, describing secret mechanisms and strange substances hidden beneath the pyramids. Some tales, though clearly mythologized, speak of liquid silver, a phrase that some interpret as a poetic reference to Mercury. Could such stories contain fragments of truth? Mainstream archaeologists urge restraint. They remind us that no direct evidence of mercury use in ancient Egypt has been unearthed. Egyptian burial practices, especially those of the Old Kingdom, focused on preservation and symbolism, not substances like mercury, which would have posed significant risks to health and handling. Their known materials of ritual were alabaster, natron, gold, earthbound, and safe. And yet, Egypt was a land of experimentation. Alchemy itself traces symbolic roots to this very region. The word alchemy derives from alchemia, the Arabic name for Egypt. The ancient Greeks referred to Egypt as the cradle of sacred science, a place where the spiritual and material were not separate realms, but intertwined. Some theorists speculate that Mercury may have held esoteric meaning for the ancient builders, a representation of transformation, fluidity, even eternity. In its reflective surface, some see a metaphor for the hidden knowledge of the universe, a liquid mirror separating the material world from the spiritual one. But if Mercury did exist beneath the pyramids, what purpose could it have served? One speculative line of thought suggests that Mercury may have been part of a hidden mechanism, perhaps related to ancient rituals, energy generation, or acoustics. The pyramid's internal chambers and shafts exhibit peculiar acoustic properties, resonances that respond to sound in unexpected ways. Some theorists wonder if liquid mercury, sealed in hidden channels, might have been part of a now lost system, ritualistic, energetic, or symbolic, designed not just for burial, but for interaction with unseen forces. Others propose that Mercury could have functioned as a kind of astronomical simulator, with its highly reflective surface mimicking the night sky, offering initiates visions of the cosmos in total darkness, far below the Earth. More fringe interpretations go further still, suggesting that Mercury played a role in ancient technologies, lost sciences that channeled energy, magnetism, or resonance through the pyramid's structure. These ideas, while unsupported by direct evidence, continue to inspire investigation, precisely because so much about the pyramid's interior, its sealed shafts, its hidden voids, remains unexplored. Of course, skepticism is not only warranted, it is necessary. The physical dangers of mercury, its toxicity, its volatility, make it unlikely as a widespread ritual substance. And yet, in the ancient world, risk was often a companion to reverence. Sacred materials, rare and hazardous, were sometimes chosen because they were powerful mysterious or difficult to obtain. And then there's this. In 2020, radar imaging near the Giza Plateau reportedly detected anomalies beneath the surface, prompting a flurry of speculation about what lies under the Sphinx and between the pyramids. Some interpreted these readings as natural cavities. Others saw them as potential chambers, waiting, still sealed, beneath thousands of years of stone and silence. Could one of them contain Mercury? To date, no official excavation has confirmed such a find in Egypt, but the question remains open, hanging like a thread between disciplines. Could the ancients have used Mercury in a way we have yet to understand? Could the shimmering metal, fluid, elusive, be a key to unraveling a forgotten chapter of their knowledge? Or is the very idea a reflection of our own modern projections, cast backward onto a civilization whose mind and motive remain just out of reach? As the desert winds brush gently across the limestone blocks and the sun sinks low behind Khufu's eternal monument, we are left not with answers, but with possibilities. What flows beneath the pyramids? Stone, sand, or something far stranger? And if the ancients sealed their secrets deep within the earth, how long before we find the courage to open what they left behind? As whispers of liquid mercury beneath ancient stone still echo through the corridors of speculation, we turn once more to the Giza Plateau, a landscape so familiar, yet so profoundly mysterious. Here, beneath the blazing Egyptian sun, the pyramids cast their eternal shadows across golden sands. Tourists walk the ancient causeways, tracing the same paths once taken by priests, kings, and laborers. And yet, beneath their feet, beneath the limestone bedrock itself, another mystery may still lie buried, a structure rumored for generations, spoken of in obscure texts and elusive accounts, the lost temple beneath the Giza Plateau. The idea is as seductive as it is controversial. Could there be a forgotten temple, hidden deep underground, sealed for millennia, waiting to be rediscovered? The Giza Plateau has long been known for its secrets. Beneath the Sphinx, a network of natural and artificial tunnels has been documented, some explored, others still off-limits or partially collapsed. In the 1990s, ground-penetrating radar scans conducted by independent researchers and later confirmed by Egyptian authorities revealed anomalous cavities beneath the plateau, voids of unknown origin and purpose. Some are narrow and shallow. Others appear far more substantial. One of the most tantalizing of these anomalies lies near the Sphinx itself. In 1993, a radar survey led by Thomas DeBecke and John Anthony West, in collaboration with geologist Dr. Robert Schoch, indicated a large rectangular chamber beneath the Sphinx's front paws. The data was compelling enough to prompt limited investigations, but definitive excavations were never publicly undertaken. Egyptian officials acknowledged the presence of the cavity, but insisted it was a natural feature or unrelated to any structure. Still, the speculation grew. Where mainstream archaeology sees voids and fissures, others see the outline of a subterranean temple lost beneath layers of stone and time. Some point to references in ancient texts and later legends that speak of halls of records buried at Giza, repositories of knowledge placed beneath the earth by an older civilization meant to endure beyond dynastic collapse and flood. One of the most cited of these sources is the work of Herodotus, the Greek historian who visited Egypt in the 5th century BC. He described extensive underground chambers and passages near the pyramids, claims echoed by other classical writers like Strabo and Pliny the Elder, who mentioned subterranean galleries and hidden halls. But could these have referred to real structures? The Giza Plateau is riddled with known shafts and tunnels, some ceremonial, others practical. Near the Pyramid of Djedefre, archaeologists have uncovered deep vertical shafts descending into the bedrock, leading to chambers carved out far below the surface. Many of these were tombs. Others appear to have served unknown or temporary purposes. But what if one such passage once led to a central subterranean complex, now sealed, eroded, or simply forgotten? Modern radar studies continue to suggest the presence of unmapped voids. A 2017 publication by a team of international researchers as part of the Scan Pyramids project noted thermal anomalies along the eastern face of the Great Pyramid, along with muon detection scans revealing large, unexplained cavities higher up within the structure. While those findings focused on the pyramid itself, they contributed to the idea that more lies hidden beneath and around these monuments than we currently understand. The idea of a subterranean temple beneath Giza is not without precedent elsewhere in Egypt. Deep below the Temple of Seti I in Abydos, a complex of tunnels and shafts leads to the mysterious Osirion, a structure significantly lower than the surrounding temple, made of granite blocks so massive they rival those used in pyramid construction. The purpose and age of the Osirion remain debated, and it stands as proof that ancient builders sometimes constructed sacred spaces below ground, perhaps to mimic the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. So what might a hidden temple beneath Giza have been? A royal tomb, a cosmic chamber, a ritual space. Some suggest that if it exists, it predates the pyramids themselves, that it was part of an earlier sacred complex around which the pyramids were later built. Others propose that it served as a spiritual engine, anchoring the pyramid complex in symbolic or energetic alignment with the heavens. Fringe theorists take the speculation further, claiming the lost temple was part of a global network of knowledge, possibly inherited from a forgotten antediluvian civilization, one destroyed by cataclysm and preserved only in legend. They point to similarities in myths across cultures. Stories of a great flood, of sacred records stored underground, of ancient wisdom waiting to be uncovered when humanity is ready. These ideas remain outside the scope of conventional archaeology, but they continue to find audiences in search of deeper meaning behind the stone. Mainstream scholars caution against reading too much into radar data and vague references from ancient texts. They point out that Giza has been extensively excavated and that no physical evidence of a lost temple has ever been definitively found. But they also acknowledge that much of the area remains unexplored or inaccessible due to structural concerns or administrative limitations. The sheer scale of Giza and the complexity of its subsurface geology leave room, however small, for the unexpected. So we return to the silence beneath the stone, to the empty shafts, the sealed chambers, the unanswered scans. Could a temple still lie hidden beneath our feet, protected by rock, waiting for the sands of time to shift? If so, what knowledge might it hold? Forgotten rituals? Lost histories? A message from a civilization that once stood at the dawn of time? Or is it possible that the mystery itself, its persistence, its resistance to resolution, is what the ancients intended to leave behind? A riddle in stone, not meant to be solved, but to be contemplated? As the sun sets behind Khufu's pyramid and shadows stretch across the plateau, the ground beneath remains still. And yet, somewhere in the silence, the question endures. What lies beneath the Giza plateau? And why has it remained hidden for so long? As we emerge from the depths of speculation beneath the Giza plateau, the question of what lies hidden beneath the surface, both literally and symbolically, leads us to one of ancient Egypt's most enigmatic and profound creations. Not a physical structure, but a vision, complex, layered, otherworldly. A map not of land or sea, but of the afterlife itself. A cosmic blueprint known to the ancients as the map of the Duat. In the cool stillness of a tomb deep in Egypt's Valley of the Kings, the stone walls are alive with painted forms, serpents, stars, boats, gates, and gods. Faint torchlight flickers across these hieroglyphs, casting shadows that seem to animate the figures themselves. It is here, in places like the tomb of Seti I or Ramesses VI, that the ancient Egyptians recorded some of their most sacred texts: the Duat, the Book of Gates, the Book of Caverns, and the Book of the Earth. Collectively, these works describe the Duat, the mysterious underworld, the realm through which the soul must travel after death to reach rebirth. But far from being abstract theology, these texts are visual, structured, and surprisingly technical. They describe a 12-hour journey through a landscape of fire, water, guardians, and thresholds, a hidden geography beneath the horizon of the western sky. A map in every sense but the literal. What did the Egyptians intend with these vivid depictions? Mainstream Egyptologists interpret the texts as religious allegory, symbolic narratives guiding the soul through a moral and cosmological process. Each hour of the night represents a trial or transformation. The deceased, like the sun god Ra, journeys through darkness toward renewal at dawn. The serpents, lakes of fire, and gates are metaphors, not destinations. But there are features in these maps that complicate a purely symbolic reading. In the tomb of Thutmose III, the Duat is laid out in an astonishingly structured form, organized into registers like modern topographical charts. It details names of specific regions within the Duat, describes routes between them, and sometimes even indicates precise orientations: east, west, above, below. In some versions, the depictions are so regular, so measured, that they resemble architectural blueprints more than mystical visions. This has led some scholars and researchers to wonder, could the map of the Duat be based on something real? A memory, perhaps, of subterranean architecture? A cosmological mirror of an actual layout once believed to exist beneath the temples or pyramids? The parallels are curious. The Duat is repeatedly described as a space beneath the earth, often linked to the west, the direction of the setting sun and the land of the dead. It features rivers and caverns, mounds and causeways. Some texts mention hidden rooms or sealed halls, guarded by deities or dangerous beings. It is divided into zones and phases, like chambers within a structure. Could this conceptual underworld have been modeled after a real secret complex? Or was it the inspiration for one? This line of thought deepens when viewed alongside other Egyptian architectural and religious features. Temples, for instance, were not just places of worship but were designed as microcosms, physical representations of the cosmos. The inner sanctum of a temple mirrored the hidden chamber of the Duat, the daily journey of the sun god, ritually reenacted by priests, was both a cosmological drama and a sacred geography. Some fringe theorists go further, suggesting that the map of the Duat is not only symbolic or structural, but technological, that it contains encoded knowledge, a form of ancient science or celestial navigation lost to time. They point to the repeated use of stellar references, the constellations, the motion of Orion, and the sacred star Sirius, as hints that the Duat map might have once doubled as an astronomical chart, guiding not only souls, but minds. This idea is not without precedent. In ancient Mesopotamia and Greece, cosmological myths often contained embedded mathematical or astronomical information. Could Egypt have done the same? And then there are the strange resonances with other cultures. In Mesoamerican mythology, there are underworlds with layered structures, 9 levels in some versions, connected by rivers, roots, or caves. In Hindu cosmology, the Patala realms lie beneath the earth, structured in concentric levels, filled with energy and guarded by serpents. Even Plato's account of Atlantis, often dismissed as allegory, speaks of a lost civilization structured in rings, with forbidden knowledge hidden underground. Are these parallels mere coincidence, or could they point to a shared archetype, a deeper collective memory of something more than myth? And if the Duat was more than a story, if it was real in some sense still beyond our grasp, then where might its paths lead, even now? As the map of the Duat draws celestial pathways across the walls of ancient tombs, connecting gods, stars, and souls in a sacred journey through the underworld, we now turn our attention to the oldest religious texts ever carved into stone, the earliest known spiritual writings of ancient Egypt. Deep inside the pyramids of Saqqara, far from the gaze of the living world, a set of cryptic inscriptions continues to provoke awe, reverence, and debate. These are the pyramid texts, and within them lie some of the most enigmatic references to the stars ever recorded. Inside the Pyramid of Unas, the last king of Egypt's 5th dynasty, the air is heavy with the dust of centuries. The limestone walls are densely packed with hieroglyphs, unceremonious in arrangement, almost clinical in appearance, yet unmistakably sacred. These inscriptions, dating back to around 2400 BC, are not decorative. They are not ornamental. They are a carefully etched spiritual program, an operating manual for the pharaoh's soul. Written vertically, line after line, the pyramid texts were designed not to be read by the living, but by the divine forces awaiting in the afterlife. Their purpose was to guide the soul of the deceased pharaoh through the treacherous landscape of the Duat and into the realm of the imperishable stars. But which stars, exactly? Over 4,000 years ago, Egyptian priests wrote of the Ikemusek, the unwearying ones, stars that never set, circling endlessly above the northern horizon. These were not just celestial bodies, they were divine destinations. The king was to become one of them, to join the undying stars and escape the cycles of mortality. The pyramid texts mention this transformation repeatedly. You shall ascend to the sky among the stars. You shall not perish. The astronomical knowledge embedded in these texts is astonishing in its precision and symbolism. The Egyptians had identified the stars that never dipped below the horizon, the so-called circumpolar stars, and regarded them as eternal. For them, the heavens were not distant or metaphorical. They were alive, structured, navigable. And within the walls of these pyramids, we find what appears to be not just mythology, but astronomy woven into theology. Some scholars point to specific star groupings, such as Orion and Sirius, that appear again and again in ancient texts and alignments. Orion, associated with the god Osiris, symbolized rebirth and kingship. Sirius, or Sopdet, heralded the annual flooding of the Nile, and with it, life itself. The alignment of pyramids, temples, and shafts, especially within the Great Pyramid, has been linked to these celestial markers, suggesting that Egypt's sacred architecture was deeply, perhaps intentionally, tied to the movement of the heavens. But what if the pyramid texts contain more than just poetic references? Some researchers have begun to analyze the language of the texts as encodings of celestial mechanics. The frequent mention of ascending on the ladder of the sky, opening the doors of the firmament, and joining the sun's bark has been interpreted by some as symbolic, yes, but also possibly indicative of an ancient understanding of stellar cycles, precession, and cosmological placement. Mainstream Egyptology remains cautious. It recognizes the texts as the foundation of Egyptian religious belief, a fusion of ritual, mythology, and royal ideology. But the line between theology and astronomy in ancient Egypt was never firm. The heavens were not merely observed, they were inhabited by gods. The stars were not cold points of light, but way stations for the soul. In this worldview, to read the stars was to read destiny. And yet, there are mysteries within the texts that resist easy explanation. In the Pyramid of Djedefre, the successor to Unas, the texts refer to a great star that leads the way, a phrase some interpret as a reference to Sirius, while others suggest it may reflect a lost understanding of celestial orientation or timekeeping. In other passages, there are mentions of the two companions of the king, interpreted by some as stars that flank Orion or possibly the belt itself. Then there are more obscure references, phrases about the door of the sky opening or the sky being split, which some researchers believe might reflect astronomical phenomena such as eclipses or alignments. Others, moving into more speculative territory, propose that these descriptions suggest a sacred technology or knowledge system for interacting with the cosmos, perhaps ritualistically, perhaps symbolically, perhaps even literally. Fringe theorists go further still, suggesting that the pyramid texts encode lost knowledge of stellar propulsion, energy grids, or star portals, ideas far beyond the scope of current archaeology. While these claims are often unsupported by physical evidence, their persistence underscores a deeper fascination. How could a civilization so ancient, with no known telescopic instruments, possess such an enduring and structured vision of the stars? The question is not just one of science, it's one of purpose. Why did the Egyptians devote such extraordinary effort to aligning tombs, carving texts, and shaping rituals that revolved around stars? Was it simply symbolic immortality? Or did they believe, on some level, that the stars themselves held the key to literal transformation? Today, as we look up at the same night sky the ancient Egyptians once studied, the stars still burn with the same cold brilliance. But what we see as distant suns, they saw as divine destinations, beacons of continuity, order, and power. The pyramid texts endure not just as relics, but as whispers from a world where the spiritual and the astronomical were inseparable. They speak of ascent, of return, of joining the stars, not as an act of fiction, but as a fundamental truth. And so we ask, did these texts reflect merely what the Egyptians believed? Or did they encode something they knew? A knowledge still waiting to be fully understood, hidden not in the heavens but in the stones that point toward them. As the celestial verses of the pyramid texts draw our gaze upward, to the stars and their divine significance, we are reminded that in the Egyptian worldview, what lies above is always mirrored below. The heavens reflected the earth, and the earth concealed realms every bit as sacred, as mysterious, and as unreachable. And no figure better represents this union between sky and underworld than Osiris, the god of resurrection, of eternal kingship, and of death itself. But what if Osiris, long considered a mythic archetype, had not one, but two tombs? We begin not in the crowded sands of Giza, but in the sacred city of Abydos, one of Egypt's oldest and most venerated sites. Nestled within its dusty hills lies the Osirian, a subterranean structure built behind the grand temple of Seti Wurs. At first glance, the Osirian seems out of place. Its massive granite blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, are strikingly different from the lighter limestone used in the adjacent temple. The design, too, is unusual. Sunken into the earth, surrounded by water channels, and accessible only by descending a narrow passage, the Osirian feels more ancient than the temple beside it, as if it was uncovered rather than built anew. Inside, stone pillars rise from a flooded floor. The chamber is eerily quiet, its still water reflecting the heavy geometry above. There is little ornamentation, no colorful reliefs, no hymns to the gods, just stone, water, and silence. And at its heart lies what many believe is a symbolic tomb of Osiris. Egyptologists generally agree that the Osirian served as a ritual space, a cenotaph, not a burial. Its orientation and watery setting mirror descriptions of the underworld from funerary texts, a realm beneath the earth, navigated by boat, where the soul must pass through gates and guardians. It was, in this view, a sacred theater of rebirth, designed to honor Osiris and perhaps to initiate pharaohs into the mysteries of the afterlife. But some researchers have asked, why build such a structure in such an inaccessible way? Why use stones of such immense weight hauled from distant quarries? And why leave it virtually unadorned, unless it had a purpose deeper than ritual, perhaps deeper than time? And so the idea of the tomb of Osiris takes root, not as a literal burial site, but as a chamber tied to something primordial, something before memory. Yet this is only one part of the mystery. Hundreds of miles north, beneath the bustling plateau of Giza, another contender for Osiris's tomb has emerged, one far more controversial and far less understood. Discovered in the late 1990s, beneath a causeway near the Great Pyramid, the so-called Osiris shaft descends over 100 feet into the bedrock, revealing 3 levels of chambers stacked atop one another. The final level, dark, damp, and reached only by navigating narrow vertical shafts, contains a large central sarcophagus surrounded by deep channels cut into the stone floor, now flooded with water. This chamber, too, has been linked to Osiris, not through inscriptions but through association and symbolism. Egyptian antiquities officials, including the late Zahi Hawass, dubbed the site a symbolic tomb of Osiris, citing its unique design and the apparent absence of any human remains. But details remain scarce. The shaft is closed to the public, and formal publications are limited. What has been released raises more questions than answers. Why does this chamber mirror, in part, the watery symbolism of the Osirion at Abydos? Why is the sarcophagus empty, and who carved the shaft so deep beneath the Giza Plateau? Is this simply another ritual tomb, a cenotaph created for symbolic purposes? Or could it represent a lost tradition, one connected to Osiris not in myth, but in memory? These dual structures, one at Abydos, one at Giza, sit at the heart of the mystery. Egyptologists point out that Osiris, as a god, was never buried in a physical sense. His death and resurrection were cosmic events told in myth and reenacted in ritual. His body, according to legend, was scattered across Egypt by his brother Set, with each piece buried in a different location. This dispersion gave rise to numerous local tombs of Osiris, each claiming a part of the god's essence. Yet Abydos was always considered the most sacred of these, the location where Osiris's head, or in some traditions, his entire form, was interred. Pilgrimages to Abydos were seen as journeys of spiritual renewal. To die without making the pilgrimage was, for many Egyptians, an incomplete death. Still, the Osiris shaft at Giza complicates this narrative. Giza, traditionally associated with the sun cult of Ra, was not a center of Osirian worship. And yet, here we find a subterranean chamber carved with purpose, depth, and precision, bearing the weight of symbolic association with the very god who ruled over the West, the underworld, and the realm of the dead. Could this be an earlier expression of Osirian belief at Giza? Or was it a later attempt to integrate solar and funerary ideologies under one monumental landscape? Some fringe theorists suggest a more radical possibility, that the Osiris myth is a veiled history, and that these twin tombs mark the burial of a real figure, now lost in legend. They point to the immense antiquity of both sites, the architectural anomalies, and the lack of definitive dating. Some even propose that Osiris represents a memory of a pre-dynastic civilization, one erased by time and reimagined in divine form. Mainstream archaeology does not support such views. The prevailing consensus holds that both the Osirian and the Osiris shaft were created within the context of dynastic religion, ritual spaces, not repositories of hidden history. But as with so many aspects of ancient Egypt, what survives in stone often outlasts our certainty. Two sites, two symbolic tombs, two sacred landscapes separated by distance, joined by myth. Could they represent dual aspects of Osiris himself, death and rebirth, memory and transformation, the deep south of Abydos and the high horizon of Giza? Or is the answer still sleeping beneath the ground, sealed behind stone and water, waiting for those who still listen to the silence? What do the dual tombs of Osiris really conceal? And why does his presence seem to echo from two ends of Egypt's sacred geography, one watching the setting sun, the other hidden in its eternal shadow? As we move through the sacred geography of Egypt, from the dual tombs of Osiris echoing with myth and silence, we now turn to an object both small and enigmatic, a relic not of grand stone architecture or buried temples, but of symbolism, power, and mystery condensed into a single material form. It is known as the green stone of Wadjet, and despite its modest size, its meaning and origin remain elusive. In dim museum halls and behind thick glass cases, one may come across a curious artifact, a serpent coiled around a disc, carved in a luminous, almost otherworldly green. Often no larger than a hand, this emblem appears repeatedly across ancient Egyptian amulets, crowns, and reliefs. The image is unmistakable. Wadjet, the cobra goddess of protection who guarded the Pharaoh and the land of Lower Egypt with unblinking vigilance. Her presence, always regal and poised, is tied deeply to sovereignty, wisdom, and divine sight. But it is not just the symbol that captivates. It is the stone itself. Some of these ancient depictions of Wadjet, particularly those most revered in temple rituals and elite burials, are carved from a material that continues to baffle researchers. A translucent green substance with a glassy sheen and unusual composition. The Egyptians valued it immensely. They called it tekhenet, a word translated by some as shining, radiant, or divine stone. It was not jade, it was not emerald, and it was certainly not easily sourced. So what was this green stone, and why was it so important? The most common theory is that the material was a form of silica-rich natural glass, perhaps Libyan desert glass, a rare substance found only in a remote part of the western desert near the border with modern-day Libya. Formed by a cataclysmic event, possibly a meteor airburst or high-energy impact. This natural glass is 29 million years old and exists in no other part of the world. Its color ranges from pale yellow to deep greenish hues, and its purity is remarkable. Some scholars suggest that the greenstone of Wadjet, particularly in its most prized forms, was carved from this glass. If true, it would mean the Egyptians were using material created by an event as violent and ancient as the cosmos itself. A cosmic birth, reshaped into an object of protection and power. Interestingly, a carved scarab made from Libyan desert glass was found in Tutankhamun's pectoral, set alongside gold and precious stones. The scarab glows with a translucent golden-green hue, uncanny, pristine, and unique. This single item suggests that the stone had symbolic value far beyond its appearance. And here, the mystery deepens. Why would a meteorite-borne material, rare, virtually unobtainable, and incredibly difficult to work, be associated so closely with Wadjet, the Eye of Protection, the Sentinel of the Pharaoh? Why choose this stone, above all others, to represent her gaze? In Egyptian cosmology, the Eye of Wadjet was more than a symbol. It was a force, a living, divine energy that could see all, strike enemies, and restore balance. In some traditions, the Eye of Wadjet was interchangeable with the Eye of Ra, or even the Eye of Horus, forming a trinity of cosmic perception and divine vengeance. Was the green stone seen not simply as an emblem, but as a conductor of divine energy? Some theorists have speculated that the Egyptians believed this stone, formed in a fire from the sky, held celestial power. That it was not merely decorative, but sacred by origin. This aligns with broader Egyptian practices that assigned special properties to materials based on their color, origin, and symbolic associations. Green, in particular, was the color of regeneration and life, the color of Osiris's flesh, of fertile Nile silt, of resurrection itself. But others go further. In more speculative circles, the green stone of Wadjet is viewed as something beyond natural glass. Some suggest it is evidence of lost knowledge of meteoritic or even synthetic materials, created or preserved by a forgotten chapter of human history. They point to the difficulty of carving such hard, brittle glass without modern tools. Could the ancient Egyptians have known techniques we no longer understand? Or was the stone itself a legacy from an earlier age, passed down, repurposed, reinterpreted? Still others draw comparisons with sacred stones in other traditions, such as the Chintamani stone of Buddhist lore, said to have fallen from the heavens, or the Kaaba's black stone in Mecca, long believed to be of meteoric origin. Is there a shared memory among civilizations, of objects from the sky imbued with spiritual force? Back in Egypt, the green stone persists as a quiet enigma. Despite its rarity, it continued to appear in tombs, temples, and sacred objects across dynasties. In statues of Wadjet, the eyes are often inlaid with green, sometimes glass, sometimes faience, but occasionally something richer, something glowing faintly with the light of the unknown. Mainstream Egyptology generally holds that the stone's meaning lies in symbolism, not material mystery, that it was chosen for color, for its association with fertility and protection, that any connection to cosmic origins is poetic, not intentional. But even this raises questions. How did the Egyptians identify and value such a rare stone? How did they associate it so precisely with a goddess tied to divine vision and cosmic balance? And why, after thousands of years, does the green stone still defy full classification, its sourcing and distribution still debated? As light filters through museum glass and catches the surface of one such artifact, the stone seems to shimmer, caught between clarity and opacity, sky and earth, past and present. Could the green stone of Wadjet be more than a symbol? Could it be a fragment of an ancient encounter between human beings and the stars? Or is it the embodiment of an idea older than myth itself, that the divine is not distant but woven into matter, waiting to be recognized? In stone, in serpent, in silence? What else might the green stone of Wadjet reveal, if we could see it as the ancients once did? As the shimmering green of Wadjet's sacred stone fades into the shadows of antiquity, we descend once more into the quieter chambers of ancient Egyptian mystery, where protection was not just a prayer but a practice, woven into ritual objects of astonishing craftsmanship and eerie symbolism. Among these, few are as enigmatic as the so-called wands of protection, delicately curved implements, carved from ivory and etched with strange figures, their surfaces alive with the heads of animals, gods, and creatures that seem to straddle the boundary between the natural and the supernatural. Discovered mostly in Middle Kingdom tombs, particularly in sites like El-Lisht, Abydos, and Thebes, these wands were buried beside women and children, sometimes in multiples, often broken, and always buried deliberately. Measuring roughly 6 to 15 inches in length, the wands are almost uniformly crescent-shaped, their curves suggestive of the horn of an animal, or the arc of the moon. They are carved from hippopotamus ivory, a material both sacred and symbolic. In Egyptian mythology, the hippo, though fearsome, was linked to Taweret, the protective goddess of childbirth. With her lion's limbs, swollen belly, and crocodile tail, Taweret was no gentle figure, but a guardian of fierce maternal strength. To carve a wand from the very creature that embodied her power was to channel that strength into a physical object, something tangible, something protective. Yet, it is the imagery carved into these wands that truly stirs the imagination. Row upon row of creatures march along their surface: crocodiles, jackals, birds, snakes, sphinxes, and more abstract figures, some bearing unmistakable human features, others with grinning mouths or elongated bodies that defy classification. Many of the heads appear composite, merging animal forms in unnatural ways. And while some clearly represent gods or familiar animals, others remain unidentified, their meanings lost to time. What were these beings? Guardians, spirits, symbols of chaos held at bay? Scholars have interpreted the wands as apotropaic devices, tools used to ward off evil forces, particularly during childbirth, illness, or vulnerable stages of life. In this view, the animal-headed figures represent protective spirits, each responsible for shielding the individual from danger in both this world and the next. And yet, there is something unusually specific, almost codified, about their arrangement. In several wands, the figures appear in a fixed order, almost like a procession or sequence. Some repeat across different artifacts, as though following an established template. Could they represent a ritual formula, a kind of spiritual circuitry through which protective power flowed? One figure in particular recurs across many wands, a naked, squatting, dwarf-like being with a lion's mane and exaggerated facial features. This is believed to be Bes, a household deity who would later become popular in the New Kingdom. Bes, with his fearsome grin and outstretched tongue, was thought to terrify malevolent spirits. But during the Middle Kingdom, his appearance is less distinct, his identity still merging with other forms. Perhaps these wands reflect the early evolution of divine archetypes, half-formed beings on the cusp of becoming gods. Yet even if we accept the mainstream explanation that these wands were used to safeguard women and children, many questions remain unanswered. Why are the creatures depicted with such odd combinations of features? Why do they often face outward, as though meant to repel something? And why are many of the wands intentionally broken, as if to release or retire their power? Some Egyptologists believe the wands were broken after use, once their ritual purpose had been fulfilled. Others suggest the act of breaking was itself a ritual, part of a larger magical logic we no longer fully understand. In either case, it indicates that the wands were not merely decorative, but deeply functional, activated, deactivated, and treated with reverence. More speculative voices have proposed even stranger ideas. Some fringe theorists suggest that the wands are not wands at all, but components of a more complex mechanism, perhaps even instruments used in rites of sound, resonance, or energy manipulation. The repeated appearance of open-mouthed creatures and precise sequences of form has led a few to hypothesize that these wands acted as conduits, whether spiritual or vibrational. Others note the uncanny resemblance between some of the animal-headed figures and iconography found in pre-dynastic and even non-Egyptian cultures, hinting at an older origin for these symbols. Could the wands represent remnants of a lost system of belief, one that predates the written record? More cautiously, a few researchers have observed that some of the figures on the wands bear stylistic similarities to Mesopotamian and Levantine motifs, raising the possibility of cultural exchange or syncretism during periods of contact. If true, the wands may represent a fusion of protective iconographies, Egyptian, Near Eastern, and perhaps even earlier traditions now forgotten. And what of the wands found in the tombs of children? Were these tools intended to protect not only the living, but also the dead? To guard the soul as it journeyed through the dangers of the Duat, the underworld? If so, then perhaps the strange animals on the wands were more than just symbols of protection. Perhaps they were guides or companions, beings meant to walk with the departed through trials toward renewal. Despite decades of study, the wands of protection remain an unsettled chapter in the story of ancient Egypt. Their meanings are partly known, partly guessed, and partly lost. They sit at the intersection of religion, magic, and daily life, tools made for the most intimate moments of vulnerability, and yet carved with imagery that suggests a much larger cosmology. Who were the creatures that peer out from these ivory arcs? Why were they so consistently represented, and what hidden language do their forms still speak? Were the wands tools of comfort, or tools of power? And in the dim corridors of forgotten tombs, might there still lie a wand untouched, unbroken, waiting to reveal the full truth of what the ancients believed could guard the soul from all things unseen? As we step away from the strange, animal-headed wands of protection, objects meant to shield the living and guide the dead, we now enter a place where identity itself is altered. A city lost to time, raised from the desert for a single heretical purpose. Here, amid the ruins of limestone temples and sun-scorched tombs, a new kind of mystery emerges. Not one of gods or amulets, but of the human form itself. This is Amarna, and among its buried dead lie skulls, unlike any others in ancient Egypt. The Amarna Plain in Middle Egypt stretches eastward toward the Nile, a flat expanse where golden sands meet the deep blue sky. Once known as Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten, it was founded around 1350 BC by the Pharaoh Akhenaten, a ruler whose religious revolution would shake the foundation of Egyptian tradition. He abandoned the pantheon of gods, exalting instead a single deity, the Aten, the disk of the sun, and relocated his court here to build a city in the god's honor. For a brief span of 17 years, Amarna flourished. Then, almost as quickly, it was abandoned, left to the wind and dust. But what lay beneath its sun-baked surface remained, undisturbed until modern excavations uncovered a disturbing and perplexing detail. A number of elongated human skulls, buried within Amarna's cemeteries, showing features that set them apart from typical Egyptian remains. The skulls are longer, flatter, and more obliquely sloped at the back, some with high cranial vaults and depressed occipital bones. While not all the remains found at Amarna exhibit these traits, enough do to raise significant questions. Who were these individuals? Why do their skulls differ so dramatically in shape? And, perhaps most intriguing, why do these features seem to mirror the strange depictions of Akhenaten, his wife Nefertiti, and their children in official art? In wall reliefs and temple carvings from the Amarna period, the royal family is portrayed with distinctly exaggerated features: elongated heads, narrow faces, full lips, and strangely feminine torsos. The art style, commonly referred to as Amarna realism, was a radical departure from the formal, idealized depictions of pharaohs seen before and after. Scholars often interpret this as a symbolic or religious choice, meant to express the divine uniqueness of the king and his family. But could there be more to it? Some anthropologists and Egyptologists suggest that the elongated skulls found at Amarna belong to children and laborers, not royals, and that the deformations may have been caused by natural variation, nutritional stress, or environmental factors. Others point to cradle boarding, a cultural practice in which the skull is intentionally shaped in infancy using cloth or boards, a method seen in various parts of the ancient world, from the Andes to Central Asia. Yet, no known records or depictions in ancient Egypt explicitly describe artificial cranial deformation, and the technique is not evidenced elsewhere in Egyptian culture. If it did occur at Amarna, it seems to have been limited to a brief window in time, linked specifically to this place and period. Then there is the question of the royal mummies themselves. The identities of Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their children remain hotly debated. While several candidate mummies have been proposed, most notably the KV-55 mummy, possibly Akhenaten, none have been definitively confirmed. Some show cranial features consistent with elongation, others do not. DNA analysis has provided partial genealogical matches, but with gaps that still leave room for doubt. Fringe theorists have taken these mysteries and expanded them into bold, speculative territory. They suggest that the Amarna skulls are not the result of natural variance or cultural practice, but evidence of a biological anomaly, a distinct lineage within the Egyptian population, possibly even of non-human or extraterrestrial origin. The elongated heads, so dramatically stylized in the art of the time, are seen by some as faithful representations of actual physical traits, rather than symbolic flourishes. These theories often draw comparisons to the Paracas skulls of Peru, similarly elongated remains, some of which appear to have larger cranial capacities and unique sutural patterns. Proponents argue that such anomalies challenge our understanding of ancient genetics and raise questions about lost knowledge or forgotten migrations. Of course, mainstream science approaches such claims with skepticism. No conclusive evidence supports the idea of extraterrestrial involvement or unknown species. And yet, the questions persist, not because of the theories, but because of what remains unknown. Why did the Amarna period produce such a sharp departure in both artistic expression and, apparently, biological representation? Why do certain skulls from the site show such clear elongation, when similar traits are virtually absent elsewhere in Egyptian burial grounds? Why did the royal family go to such lengths to reimagine their bodies, their god, and their world? And then, there's the silence that followed. After Akhenaten's death, his city was abandoned. His name and legacy were erased. Temples were smashed, statues defaced, and the memory of the Aten cult was scrubbed from the historical record. The return to traditional worship under Tutankhamun and his successors was swift and deliberate. Could it be that the changes seen at Amarna, the theology, the iconography, the mysterious skulls, were not merely aberrations, but signs of something deeper and more dangerous, something the priesthood and later rulers sought to bury? Perhaps it was a mutation, a rare genetic trait that was exalted, mythologized, even worshipped. Perhaps it was entirely symbolic, an attempt to signal a divine break from the past. Or perhaps it was something else, something we are not yet prepared to understand. Are the elongated skulls of Amarna a reflection of human diversity, artistic abstraction, or a glimpse into a forgotten chapter of our ancient history? And if the answers still lie beneath the sands of Akhenaten, what truths might awaken when we finally unearth them? As the sun begins to dip beyond the broken skyline of Akhenaten, casting long shadows over the memories of elongated skulls and erased dynasties, we now journey west, far beyond the Nile Valley, beyond even the borders of ancient Egypt itself. Here, in one of the most desolate and seemingly lifeless places on Earth, scattered across the sands of the vast Sahara, stand the silent remains of something older, more cryptic. Weathered by wind, half buried in shifting dunes, the stone circles of the Sahara whisper of a time long forgotten, and of purposes still unknown. In the heart of the desert, amid wide expanses of ochre rock, dry lake beds, and open skies, stand crude rings of standing stones. Some are simple, just a few upright slabs forming incomplete loops. Others are far more complex, precise circles, elliptical formations, spirals, and even arrangements that seem to trace celestial alignments. Most are found in southern Algeria, Libya, Niger, and parts of Mali, often located atop windswept plateaus or along the edges of what were once ancient lakes and grasslands. These stone circles vary widely in size. Some are just a few meters across, others span tens of meters. The stones themselves range from small, deliberately placed rocks to large monoliths standing upright, silent sentinels guarding forgotten intentions. What makes these formations so puzzling is not only their location, in a desert that would seem inhospitable to human settlement, but their age. Dating these structures is difficult. The Sahara has no shortage of stone, and erosion blurs the timeline. However, through radiocarbon testing of charcoal remains and pottery fragments found nearby, many archaeologists estimate that some of the stone circles could be over 6,000 years old, possibly as far back as 4000 BC, or even earlier. That places their construction in the Neolithic period, long before the rise of dynastic Egypt. But who built them? The people of this ancient Sahara were part of a now-lost culture that flourished when the desert was not yet a desert. Known today as the Green Sahara period, this era was marked by seasonal rains, rivers, and lush savannas. Rock art from the same regions depicts cattle herding, fishing, and scenes of everyday life, evidence of a thriving human presence. These were pastoralist societies, but their connection to Egypt and the degree of their sophistication remains largely speculative. Mainstream theories hold that the circles may have served as burial markers, ritual sites, or even early calendars tracking solstices or the movement of stars. Some formations, particularly those at sites like Nabta Playa, show convincing evidence of astronomical alignment. Here, in southern Egypt near the Sudanese border, a cluster of stones has been found aligned to the summer solstice sunrise, predating Stonehenge by 1,000 years. Could similar knowledge have spread westward across the Sahara? Nabta Playa, in particular, has drawn comparisons to other megalithic sites across the world. Like the stone circles of Europe and the Near East, it seems to suggest a shared human instinct to mark time, to honor the sky, to encode memory in stone. But the Sahara's stone circles remain less studied, partly because of their remote locations, partly because of political instability in the region, and partly, perhaps, because they don't fit neatly into established narratives. Their builders left no written records, no names, no myths etched in stone. Only the arrangements themselves, open to interpretation, enigmatic, eternal. This has opened the door to speculative and fringe theories, many of which imagine the circles as part of a lost advanced civilization, or even as extraterrestrial landing sites. Some point to the precision of certain formations, or the geometry of spirals and double rings, as evidence of advanced mathematics. Others argue that the circles were part of a prehistoric knowledge network, connected to similar stone constructions in ancient Egypt, the Levant, or even sub-Saharan Africa. A few theories go further still, suggesting that the Sahara's stone circles represent a proto-civilization, an earlier stage of societal development that laid the groundwork for later cultures like the Egyptians, Nubians, or Berbers. This is not entirely implausible. Genetic studies have shown shared ancestry between early North African populations and Nile Valley peoples. Some scholars believe that the movement of people across the Sahara during the greener millennia may have influenced Egypt's earliest religious and cultural foundations. If so, could the stone circles be ancestral echoes of ideas that would later shape pyramids, temples, and cosmic beliefs? And then there is the still lingering question of why. Why build in circles? Why erect stones that seem to serve no agricultural or defensive purpose? Why align them to stars or cardinal directions? Were they sacred places, community gathering points, portals to something more abstract, mythical centers of power, memory, or spiritual transformation? We may never know. Many of these sites remain unexcavated, threatened by erosion, looting, or simply forgotten in the vastness of the desert. But the mystery endures. Amid the silence of the Sahara, beneath skies that have not changed in thousands of years, these stones still stand. They have no voice, no scripture, no legend passed down. Yet their presence suggests meaning, intention, design, and perhaps that is why they continue to captivate, to remind us that not all knowledge leaves a written trace, that some truths are carved into the earth itself. Could the stone circles of the Sahara be remnants of a forgotten spiritual system? Clues to a lost people who measured time and stars and shaped their world through stone? Or are they simply monuments to human curiosity, preserved in the stillness of the desert, waiting for someone to finally understand? From the forgotten stone circles of the Sahara, mute reminders of a world before the desert, we turn our gaze back to the structured brilliance of ancient Egypt, a land where geometry shaped eternity and the divine was etched in limestone. But amid the grandeur of temples and the majesty of pyramids, there is one name that echoes with particular reverence. A figure regarded not only as a genius, but as a near-mythic being. A man who changed the course of Egyptian history, and yet whose final resting place has never been found. His name is Imhotep, and his tomb remains one of Egypt's greatest unsolved mysteries. The search begins near Saqqara, a vast necropolis just south of Cairo, where dusty winds sweep over step pyramids and crumbling mastabas. This is the site of Egypt's oldest pyramid, the Pyramid of Djedefre, a six-tiered structure of limestone blocks rising in stark defiance of time. And it is here, some 4,700 years ago, that Imhotep made his mark. Imhotep was no ordinary court official. Serving under Pharaoh Djedefre during the Third Dynasty, around 2660 BC, he was a polymath, architect, priest, physician, and vizier. Most famously, he is credited with designing the step pyramid itself, the world's first large-scale stone structure. In doing so, he effectively invented monumental architecture in Egypt. But his achievements didn't end there. He was also believed to be a healer of rare knowledge. Centuries after his death, Imhotep was deified, one of the few non-royals in Egyptian history to be elevated to divine status. By the time of the New Kingdom and late period, pilgrims journeyed to his shrines seeking cures and wisdom, leaving behind votive offerings and inscriptions. To later Greeks, he was identified with Asclepius, the god of medicine. And yet, despite his towering legacy, Imhotep's tomb has never been found. How can the burial place of such a revered figure, one whose memory endured for over 2 millennia, have vanished so completely? Ancient records offer tantalizing clues. Some sources hint that Imhotep was buried somewhere near Saqqara, possibly even within or beneath the pyramid complex he designed. But extensive excavations over the past century have failed to produce definitive evidence. In the 1920s and again in the early 2000s, teams excavating around the Djedefre Pyramid uncovered a labyrinth of underground tunnels, galleries, and burial shafts, many of them dating to later periods. Among these were thousands of ibis mummies, offerings to the deified Imhotep in the Ptolemaic era. The nearby ibis galleries and the Temple of Imhotep confirmed his lasting cultic importance, but they offered no tomb. So where is he? One possibility is that his tomb has simply not yet been located, that it lies deeper still beneath the sands of Saqqara, perhaps beneath a structure already known but not fully explored. Some scholars have speculated that his tomb might be hidden beneath a false floor or located in an unexcavated shaft within the step pyramid complex itself. The ancient Egyptians were masters of concealment, and Imhotep, architect of the first pyramid, would have known better than anyone how to hide a burial chamber. Another theory suggests his tomb was intentionally left unmarked, a reflection of humility or secrecy. As a high priest and medical practitioner, perhaps his burial was surrounded by rites and taboos we no longer understand. More speculative voices have taken these gaps and extended them into more esoteric territory. Some suggest that Imhotep's tomb was never meant to be found, that it holds knowledge too powerful or too sacred to be unearthed. In fringe circles, Imhotep is occasionally credited with possessing lost scientific wisdom, even Atlantean origins, passed down from a pre-dynastic civilization. These claims, though lacking credible evidence, persist in part because of the sheer breadth of disciplines Imhotep is associated with: engineering, medicine, magic, astronomy. Could it be that his tomb holds not only his remains, but also texts, instruments, or knowledge suppressed or hidden by later generations? Interestingly, echoes of such beliefs can be found in the Ptolemaic-era cult of Imhotep. Temple inscriptions describe him as a master of secrets, a man who held the scrolls of life and whose wisdom could speak to the gods. To worshippers over 2,000 years after his death, Imhotep was not just a healer, he was a guardian of ancient truths. It is perhaps this idea that his tomb might house forgotten knowledge that keeps the mystery alive. Modern archaeologists continue to scan the Saqqara Plateau with ground-penetrating radar, searching for anomalies beneath the surface. Every few years, reports emerge of new shafts, unexplored corridors, or sealed chambers, and with each discovery comes the quiet hope that one might finally lead to Imhotep. But so far, the sands have kept their secret. And yet, we are left with questions. Why was a man of such significance, whose cult outlasted pharaohs and dynasties, not buried in a clearly marked tomb, celebrated in the same way as kings? Was he interred in an underground labyrinth, protected by traps and passages now collapsed? Or has his final resting place been hiding in plain sight, misidentified, mislabeled, or simply waiting for the right eyes to see? Could the tomb of Imhotep still lie beneath the stepped shadows of Saqqara, untouched by time, preserving the final secrets of Egypt's first genius? And if we one day find it, what exactly will we uncover? From the sun-drenched sands of Saqqara, where the tomb of Egypt's first architect may still lie beneath unbroken stone, we now move into a far darker, colder realm, one that breathes with moisture, muffled silence, and decay. Here, in lands shrouded in mist and myth, the past is not buried in stone but suspended in peat. These are not pyramids or monuments, these are graves in water, forgotten, concealed, and preserved not by human design, but by the quiet, natural alchemy of the earth itself. These are the Whispering Bog Bodies. Northern Europe. The landscape changes. Wide, open moors, windswept heaths, and ancient wetlands, untouched by modern hands. The air here carries a kind of stillness, as though time itself has slowed. In Ireland, in Denmark, in the Netherlands and Germany, among remote boglands once feared and revered, archaeologists have uncovered a haunting kind of time capsule. Human bodies, often nearly intact, pulled from the peat, their skin still soft and leathery, their hair still discernible. Some retain fingernails, eyelashes, even the contents of their final meal. They are so well preserved that at first glance they appear only recently deceased. But scientific dating reveals otherwise. Many of them died over 2,000 years ago, during the Iron Age, between 400 BC and 100 AD. Some are older still. The bogs are cold acidic, and low in oxygen, an ideal environment for the preservation of organic matter. These natural conditions essentially mummify the bodies without the need for embalming. And yet, despite this scientific clarity, the mystery remains, not in how they were preserved, but in why they were placed there in the first place, and what messages, if any, they were meant to carry forward through time. Take the case of Toland Man, discovered in Denmark in 1950. His eyes are gently closed. His lips curve into a faint, peaceful smile. The noose still tight around his neck tells another story. He was hanged, likely as part of a ritual. Yet no grave markers were found. No tomb, just a body, curled as if sleeping, left in the peat. Or Clonycavan Man, found in an Irish bog in 2003. His skull was smashed, the top of his head split. Yet his hair was styled with a kind of Iron Age gel, pine resin imported from as far away as Spain or France. Was he a victim of violence or of ceremony? What makes these bog bodies so enigmatic? From the sun-drenched sands of Saqqara, where the tomb of Egypt's first architect may still lie beneath unbroken stone, we now move into a far darker, colder realm, one that breathes with moisture, muffled silence, and decay. Here, in lands shrouded in mist and myth, the past is not buried in stone but suspended in peat. These are not pyramids or monuments. These are graves in water, forgotten, concealed, and preserved not by human design, but by the quiet, natural alchemy of the earth itself. These are the Whispering Bog Bodies. Northern Europe. The landscape changes. Wide, open moors, windswept heaths, and ancient wetlands, untouched by modern hands. The air here carries a kind of stillness, as though time itself has slowed. In Ireland, in Denmark, in the Netherlands and Germany, among remote boglands once feared and revered, archaeologists have uncovered a haunting kind of time capsule. Human bodies, often nearly intact, pulled from the peat, their skin still soft and leathery, their hair still discernible. Some retain fingernails, eyelashes, even the contents of their final meal. They are so well preserved that at first glance they appear only recently deceased. But scientific dating reveals otherwise. Many of them died over 2,000 years ago, during the Iron Age, between 400 BC and 100 AD. Some are older still. The bogs are cold, acidic, and low in oxygen, an ideal environment for the preservation of organic matter. These natural conditions essentially mummify the bodies without the need for embalming. And yet, despite this scientific clarity, the mystery remains, not in how they were preserved, but in why they were placed there in the first place, and what messages, if any, they were meant to carry forward through time. Take the case of Toland Man, discovered in Denmark in 1950. His eyes are gently closed. His lips curve into a faint, peaceful smile. The noose still tight around his neck tells another story. He was hanged, likely as part of a ritual. Yet no grave markers were found. No tomb, just a body, curled as if sleeping, left in the peat. Or Clonycavan Man, found in an Irish bog in 2003. His skull was smashed, the top of his head split. Yet his hair was styled with a kind of Iron Age gel, pine resin imported from as far away as Spain or France. Was he a victim of violence or of ceremony? What makes these bog bodies so enigmatic is not only the mystery of the bog bodies lies in their contradiction. They are among the most physically vivid remnants of the ancient world, and yet their purpose is among the most obscure. Archaeology can offer context, radiocarbon dating, forensic reconstructions. but meaning remains elusive. Perhaps that is why they still fascinate. In a world of bones and ruins, they are faces. Faces that remind us that the past is not only architectural or symbolic, but deeply human, and that sometimes what we leave behind tells a story we did not intend to preserve. Why were these individuals chosen? Were they martyrs, criminals, sacrifices, or something more? And if the bogs whispered then, what might they still be trying to tell us now? From the silent peatlands of northern Europe, where the Whispering Bog Bodies preserve mysteries of death and ritual, we turn now to something even more singular. An object so strange, so evocative, it blurs the boundaries between burial, art, and the sacred unknown. Nestled in the collections of the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology, removed from its original context and surrounded by questions, lies a fragment of the ancient world that defies easy explanation: a painted human skull, resting atop the curved shell of a turtle. Its appearance is at once primitive and deliberate. The human cranium, missing its jawbone, is smooth, darkened by age, and adorned with faint but intentional lines of red ochre. The pigment clings to the contours of the skull in sweeping strokes and intricate symbols, now faded but still visible, a careful decoration, not an accident of time. Beneath it, balanced with precision, is the shell of a box turtle, polished and empty. The skull does not rest on the shell casually, it is cradled in it, as though placed in ritual or ceremony. But where does it come from? The object was reportedly discovered in Upper Egypt, in the region near Hierakonpolis, one of the earliest urban centers of the Pre-Dynastic Nile Valley. Archaeological evidence dates this item to the Naqada II period, around 3500 BC, a time before the unification of Egypt, before hieroglyphs, before pharaohs ruled from stone palaces. This was an Egypt still forming its identity, where tribes and proto-kingdoms coexisted with deep-rooted traditions of ancestor reverence, spirit belief, and ritual experimentation. Skull decoration is not unique to Egypt. Around the world, from Neolithic Jericho to Çatalhöyük, archaeologists have found skulls painted, plastered, or enshrined in altars, often believed to represent veneration of the dead or the ritual preservation of memory. In some cases, these were ancestors. In others, enemies. In still others, intermediaries between the living and the divine. But this skull, resting on a turtle shell? That pairing is exceedingly rare. Turtles held symbolic significance in ancient Egypt and many neighboring cultures. They were liminal creatures, at home on land and in water, often associated with creation myths, birth and protection, but also with chaos and hidden forces. Some versions of early Egyptian cosmology include a cosmic turtle supporting the world or appearing in funerary spells. In the Book of the Dead, turtles appear as both protectors and threats, depending on the context. So what does it mean when a human skull, decorated with red pigment, perhaps symbolizing blood, life, or rebirth, is placed upon such a shell? Mainstream interpretations remain cautious. Some scholars suggest the skull and shell pairing might be an offering, part of a grave assemblage meant to honor the dead or appeal to protective deities. Others posit that the turtle shell served as a kind of ritual basin, perhaps to hold incense or sacred oils, and the skull was added later as part of an evolving funerary custom. Still others see it as evidence of shamanic practice, a ritual object used not for burial, but for mediation. In this view, the decorated skull may have belonged to a spiritual figure or ancestor, preserved and used in ceremonies meant to invoke guidance, power, or altered states of consciousness. Fringe theories have gone further. Some claim the skull shows signs of trepanation, an ancient surgical procedure in which a hole is bored into the cranium, often associated with healing, spiritual access, or the release of spirits. While the evidence for this is inconclusive, the idea remains compelling, that this was not a simple burial item, but a tool of the sacred, a device through which knowledge or something else might pass. A more symbolic theory sees the skull and turtle shell as representations of heaven and earth, the human mind reaching upward, the shell rooting it in the world below. In this duality, the object becomes a kind of cosmogram, a tangible model of the universe as understood by a culture whose spiritual life we only dimly grasp. But there are no inscriptions, no accompanying texts, no burial chamber or temple wall to frame it. Only this singular artifact, found in isolation. Even the red pigment remains open to debate. Was it meant to simulate life? To mark the skull as sacred? Or to denote status? Perhaps even identifying the person as a seer, a leader, or a victim of ritual. The absence of context is, in some ways, the heart of the mystery. Had this skull been discovered alongside others, or within a clear ceremonial site, the interpretation might be more straightforward. Instead, it sits apart, a solitary enigma, simultaneously intimate and unfathomable. Today, the painted skull on a turtle shell resides behind glass, far from its birthplace, its secrets locked within ancient bone and silent symbolism. Conservators have preserved its pigments, scholars have published careful studies, yet it remains a mystery without a consensus, a relic whose full story may never be recovered. Still, we are drawn to it, not simply because it is old, but because it invites reflection. Who was this person? Why was their skull painted? Why a turtle? Was this an object of mourning or of power? Was it meant to rest forever or to speak? And more broadly, how much of early Egypt's spiritual life, the pre-dynastic world before writing and empire, has been lost to time? Could the painted skull on a turtle shell be a surviving fragment of a forgotten rite? A belief system wiped away by later orthodoxy? Or is it simply what it appears to be? A powerful object of personal or tribal meaning? Its significance now vanished, leaving only the mystery? In the end, we are left with an artifact that defies clear categorization, a skull, a shell, and a question that refuses to fade. From a lone skull cradled in a turtle shell, an object that hums with the memory of vanished rites, we descend deeper into the past and deeper underground. Beneath the Maltese archipelago, far from the monumental splendor of Egypt's pyramids but bound by a shared enigma of sacred purpose, lies a subterranean marvel carved directly into living limestone. A space of echoing silence and inexplicable sound. A space known today simply as the Hypogeum. At first glance, it might seem unremarkable. Hidden within a modern neighborhood in Paola, Malta, the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum is concealed beneath layers of history and urban life. But step inside, and the world transforms. Dim corridors wind into the rock. Cool air clings to the skin. Chambers branch out like fingers in the dark, some rough-hewn, others astonishingly precise. 3 levels descend into the earth, each older and more mysterious than the last. At its deepest, nearly 40 feet below the surface, the air thickens, not with dampness, but with something intangible. A sense of presence, stillness, expectation. Archaeologists believe the Hypogeum was constructed in stages between 4000 and 2500 BC, predating the pyramids of Giza by several centuries. It is not a tomb in the traditional Egyptian sense. Rather, it is a necropolis, a city of the dead, where the bones of over 7,000 individuals were once interred, placed in niches and chambers carved out by unknown hands using rudimentary tools. But it is one chamber in particular that has captivated the imaginations of researchers, sound engineers, mystics, and scientists alike. It is known as the Oracle Room, a modest space, elliptical in shape, carved with careful symmetry, and possessing one property that sets it apart from anything else in the ancient world. It resonates. Stand in the Oracle Room and speak in a low male voice, and the stone sings back. The chamber is tuned, intentionally or coincidentally, to resonate at 110 Hz, a frequency within the human vocal range but associated, through both modern acoustics and ancient ritual, with altered states of consciousness. At this frequency, sound waves reverberate throughout the entire Hypogeum structure, bouncing from wall to wall, enveloping the listener in a deep, vibrating echo. The effect is not merely auditory, it is physical, felt in the chest, in the bones, sometimes even in the skin. This resonance does not occur in female voices to the same extent, leading some to speculate that rituals, if they were performed here, may have been carried out exclusively by male initiates, or at least by individuals trained to chant in the resonant range. So, what purpose did this acoustic design serve? Mainstream scholars suggest the room may have been used for ritual chanting or ceremonial speech, where the amplification of a voice created an immersive, perhaps even intimidating experience. In the dim light of flickering oil lamps or complete darkness, words spoken in the Oracle Room could have filled the ears of participants as if echoing from another realm. But that explanation only scratches the surface. Some scientists studying the Hypogeum's acoustic profile have posited that sustained exposure to 110 Hz frequencies can induce subtle shifts in brainwave activity. This particular tone, they argue, can enhance theta brainwaves, often associated with meditative states, dreamlike awareness, and creative insight. Could it be that the builders of the Hypogeum understood, intuitively or otherwise, that sound could alter perception, that resonance could elevate consciousness or facilitate communication with something beyond? Other researchers note that the architectural design of the Oracle Room and surrounding chambers exhibits an almost symphonic structure, where certain corridors seem to channel sound, while others dampen it. Some speculate that this entire level of the Hypogeum may have functioned like a sound machine, constructed not only to house the dead, but to connect the living with the unseen. And then there are the more speculative ideas. Could the Hypogeum have served as an initiation chamber, where sound was used to dismantle the ordinary senses before rebirth into a new spiritual awareness? Might it have been a portal space, where ritual speech, amplified and resonating through the structure, allowed communication with ancestors, gods, or forces unnamed? Still others suggest that the Hypogeum was a memory palace, where the sound of one's voice, echoing back endlessly, was part of a psychological or cognitive practice, the resonance anchoring teachings or visions to particular chambers. No texts remain, no inscriptions, no codices, no priests to explain. The people who built the Hypogeum left only bones, red ochre markings, and silence. And yet the sound remains. Modern visitors allowed into the Oracle Room report feeling unsettled, some even disoriented. Engineers who have mapped the acoustic properties describe its architecture as impossible to replicate with the tools and understanding presumed to exist at the time. And while studies continue, few are willing to make definitive claims. Because the truth is, we don't know. Was the resonance a happy accident? Its effects noticed and incorporated into rituals after the fact? Or was it the product of intentional design, reflecting a system of knowledge lost to time? A science of sound encoded in stone? And why is this effect so precisely tuned, in a chamber carved by hand over 5,000 years ago? What did the builders hear that made them stop and carve in the dark? And what, if anything, were they hoping to awaken? The Hypogeum stands as a testament to ancient intention and mystery, where architecture becomes acoustic and sound becomes sacred. Beneath layers of rock and time, it waits, resonant, watchful, and perhaps still listening. From the echoing silence of a subterranean sound chamber in Malta, where resonance may have once opened doors to the unknown, we now turn our gaze toward the vast, sun-scorched expanse of the Sahara Desert, a landscape that, to the untrained eye, appears empty, lifeless, eternal. But what if beneath its windswept dunes and cracked rock lay something unexpected? Something ancient? Something that defies everything we think we know about the past? This is the mystery of what some now call the hidden map beneath the Sahara. Spanning over 3.5 million square miles, the Sahara is the largest hot desert in the world. It stretches across North Africa like a great ochre sea, endless plains of sand, jagged rock formations, and desiccated riverbeds that hint at a distant, forgotten past. Because the Sahara was not always a desert. Satellite imagery, sediment analysis, and archaeological evidence all tell the same story. Between 10,000 and 5,000 BC, much of the Sahara was green. Lakes, rivers, and forests flourished where now there is only aridity. This period, known as the African Humid Period, transformed the region into a vibrant ecosystem capable of supporting human life. Ancient petroglyphs found on rocks in Algeria and Niger depict elephants, giraffes, and swimmers, scenes inconceivable in the present climate. But it's not just life that once existed here, it may have been civilization. In recent years, researchers using satellite-based ground-penetrating radar have identified unusual subsurface formations, patterns beneath the sand that appear geometric, even architectural. In some cases, these shapes align suspiciously well with cardinal directions or geographic features, large rectangular outlines, intersecting linear paths, and circular impressions, all buried under layers of sediment. Some scientists believe these could be natural features, ancient dried-up rivers, wind-carved rock formations, or remnants of prehistoric floodplains. Others, however, wonder, are we looking at the ghostly remains of long-lost cities? One of the most debated sites is located near the Ahagar Mountains in southern Algeria. Remote and largely unexplored, this region has revealed stone structures that do not conform to known Berber, Roman, or Islamic architecture. Researchers have also uncovered megalithic alignments, resembling those of Stonehenge, that appear to predate dynastic Egypt by several millennia. Further south, near the border of modern-day Mauritania, lies a formation known as the Rishat structure, or the Eye of the Sahara. Measuring 25 miles across, this concentric circular landform was long thought to be a natural geological feature. But in fringe circles, some suggest it resembles the description of Atlantis given by Plato, its ringed canals, central island, and location beyond the Pillars of Hercules. While mainstream geologists dismiss such ideas as speculation, the question lingers. Why does this specific spot appear on ancient maps? Indeed, it is old maps, some dating back to the 15th and 16th centuries, that fuel the intrigue surrounding a hidden cartography beneath the sands. The Piri race map, compiled in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral using older sources, has long puzzled historians for its surprisingly accurate depiction of parts of South America and West Africa, long before modern surveying tools existed. Stranger still, portions of the map appear to show an ice-free coastline of Antarctica and inland features in Africa that should not have been known at the time. What sources was Piri Reis drawing from? He claimed his maps were based on charts drawn in the time of Alexander the Great, suggesting a lineage of geographic knowledge reaching deep into antiquity. Could some of these charts have included knowledge from a time when the Sahara was not a desert, but a populated, navigable region? A more grounded but equally fascinating line of inquiry comes from climatologists and geologists who have begun mapping the Sahara's paleo-river systems using remote sensing. These buried riverbeds, invisible to the naked eye, suggest the existence of entire hydrological networks now lost beneath the sand. Some of these channels lead to dried lake beds, others to oases, and a few led nowhere. Or rather, they lead to sites with no known modern counterpart, potential staging grounds for early human communities that left behind no visible trace. Could these buried paths be part of a prehistoric map, one etched not in parchment but in geography, a blueprint of migration, trade, or even spiritual significance? The idea becomes even more tantalizing when we consider the orientation of ancient Egyptian monuments. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, is aligned with cardinal directions to a degree of precision that continues to baffle researchers. Some have speculated that Egypt's early builders may have inherited geodesic or astronomical knowledge from a much older source, perhaps one rooted in the forgotten civilizations of the Sahara. It is important to note that the evidence remains incomplete. No fully mapped hidden city has yet emerged from the dunes. Much of the data remains classified, inaccessible, or inconclusive. The challenges are immense. Extreme heat, political instability, and the sheer scale of the desert make sustained research difficult. And yet, the clues persist. Ancient map fragments showing now lost lakes, subterranean radar images revealing symmetrical patterns, fossilized human remains found hundreds of miles from current water sources, oral traditions from Tuareg and Berber tribes that speak of sunken lands and cities swallowed by sand. The deeper one looks, the more the Sahara seems less like a barren wasteland and more like a palimpsest, a manuscript overwritten by time, its earlier story not erased but buried. What lies beneath the dunes? Are we chasing mirages of speculation, or is the desert still holding secrets from a time before Egypt? Could there be a map, figurative or literal, that tells us not only where ancient people lived, but how they understood the world? As satellites scan deeper and the winds of the Sahara shift grain by grain, perhaps the past will speak again, not through stone tablets or temple walls, but through the land itself. Until then, the map remains hidden, waiting. As the winds of the Sahara shift and whisper across buried geographies, drawing us deeper into the unknown contours of a lost past, we now turn to something smaller, delicate, even fragile, yet somehow just as enigmatic. A bloom once considered sacred, a flower that appeared again and again in art, myth, and ritual, not just as ornament, but as key. The ancient Egyptians called it session. Today, we know it as the blue lotus. Nestled in the warm marshes along the banks of the Nile, the Nymphaea caerulea, or blue lotus, once blossomed in profusion. Its vibrant, star-like petals, ranging from deep indigo to pale cerulean, opened with the sunrise and closed at dusk, mirroring the cycles of life and rebirth that permeated Egyptian cosmology. But the flower was more than beautiful. It was revered, it was ritualized, and perhaps it was transformative. Walk through the murals in the tombs of the New Kingdom. You will see the blue lotus everywhere, held in the hands of gods and kings, placed at the noses of the deceased, draped across banquet tables, even floating beside boats bound for the afterlife. In the funerary chapel of Tutankhamun, lotuses were found arranged around his golden sarcophagus. In other tombs, the petals were preserved between wrappings, as if the scent, or the memory of it, was essential to the journey beyond death. Why? The ancient Egyptians didn't explain directly. There are no surviving medical papyri that list the blue lotus in explicit pharmacological terms. But there are hints, and what we do have is suggestive enough to raise compelling questions. Scientific analysis of dried blue lotus specimens, including those found in tombs, has revealed the presence of apomorphine and nuciferin, compounds known today for their psychoactive and euphoric effects. In small doses, they produce feelings of mild euphoria, enhanced dream imagery, and a sense of calm. In higher concentrations, they may stimulate visual distortions or altered states of consciousness. Was this flower, then, used not merely for ceremony, but as a tool for transcendence? Some scholars argue that the blue lotus was a ritual intoxicant, consumed in wine or steeped in teas during sacred rites. Banquet scenes depicted in tomb paintings often show guests holding lotus blossoms while drinking from cups, suggesting the flower may have been infused into celebratory or religious feasts. But these were not merely social events. In Egypt, celebration and worship were deeply entwined. The line between festivity and divine communion was thin, if it existed at all. This raises a more intriguing possibility. Were the blue lotus rituals a means of communing with the gods? Of crossing the veil between worlds? The deity most frequently associated with the blue lotus is Nefertem, the youthful god of healing, fragrance, and the sunrise, said to have emerged from the primordial lotus that bloomed at the dawn of creation. In some myths, it was this very flower that opened to reveal the newborn sun god. The blue lotus, then, was not just symbolic, it was cosmological. It represented the unfolding of the universe, the transition from night into day, chaos into order. If the Egyptians believed that the flower carried this divine resonance, might its ritual use have been intended to invoke or replicate that first moment of cosmic awakening? This line of thought leads to deeper waters, and, for some, more speculative interpretations. Several fringe theorists and psychonauts have proposed that the blue lotus was part of an ancient pharmacological tradition, an early Egyptian equivalent of a spiritual plant medicine, similar in intent, if not in chemistry, to what later cultures practiced with ayahuasca or peyote. In this framework, the flower was used by priests, healers, or initiates to achieve altered states, not recreationally, but ritually, as a gateway to knowledge, healing, or communion with the divine. Could this explain the pervasive lotus imagery in tomb art? Could it be that the deceased, on their way to the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, were expected to undergo a visionary experience, aided by the symbolic or literal ingestion of this sacred flower? Other theories suggest that the flower may have had uses beyond individual ritual, functioning as part of larger ceremonial programs within temples, perhaps even playing a role in the famed mystery schools said to have operated in places like Abydos and Karnak. But no direct evidence of such schools remains. If there were initiatory rites involving the blue lotus, they have left little behind beyond artwork and the occasional poetic inscription. Some researchers also point to the interplay of fragrance and memory in ancient rituals. The scent of the blue lotus, sweet, almost narcotic, is thought to have been central to the experience. In ancient Egypt, perfume was sacred. Scent was not merely pleasant, it was considered a form of spiritual energy. Could the fragrance itself have been the medium through which gods were invited, spirits were calmed, and consciousness was shifted? There is no consensus. Modern Egyptologists remain cautious. Without direct textual evidence, many hesitate to claim the blue lotus had psychoactive or ritual uses. Perhaps it was merely symbolic, an emblem of beauty, rebirth, and divine fragrance. Perhaps the flower was included in burials because it grew where the dead were laid to rest. And yet the sheer consistency with which the blue lotus appears, in scenes of offering, in banquet rites, in funerary rites, in divine iconography, suggests something deeper. Its presence is not random. It is repeated, embedded, encoded. What knowledge did the ancient Egyptians possess about this unassuming flower? Was it truly a doorway to other realms, or simply a symbol of one? And if it was more than that, how much of that knowledge has been lost to time? The blue lotus remains, pressed between the pages of myth and archaeology, a petal suspended between worlds, a secret held in the scent of a flower that no longer blooms in the Nile's shallows, and perhaps still waiting to be understood. From the intoxicating fragrance of the sacred blue lotus, used in rites that blurred the line between the physical and spiritual, we move now to something far more grounded, yet no less mysterious. A detail not carved into stone temples or gilded sarcophagi, but etched instead into the very bodies of the ancient dead. Hidden not in tombs, but within their bones. Teeth, modified, shaped, altered. Not by time or accident, but by intent. And the intent, it seems, remains unknown. In the arid valleys south of Cairo, beyond the great dynastic cities and monuments of later millennia, lies Nakada, one of several pre-dynastic archaeological sites that have challenged scholars with their quiet complexity. Here, among the dry sands and eroded hills, archaeologists have uncovered cemeteries that predate the pharaohs, burials from as early as 4000 BC, long before the rise of what we think of as ancient Egypt. Within these graves, alongside primitive ceramics, flint blades, and early amulets, researchers have made a peculiar discovery. Human teeth showing signs of deliberate modification. Not wear from diet, not decay, but something far more intentional. Some teeth are filed into sharp points, like fangs. Others are notched, grooved along their sides or across their surface. In rarer cases, evidence suggests the use of small inlays or decorative fillings, although time has erased whatever materials may once have been embedded there. At first glance, these findings might appear incidental. After all, ancient peoples often engaged in forms of body modification, tattoos, piercings, scarification. But teeth? Teeth filed in such a way that it would have required considerable pain, effort, and knowledge. It raises questions few are prepared to answer. What purpose could such a practice serve? Was it symbolic, social, ritualistic? Did it mark status or transformation? Mainstream archaeologists offer cautious interpretations. Some suggest the tooth modifications may have been part of coming-of-age rituals, rites that signaled the transition from youth to adulthood in early communities. Others theorize they were tribal identifiers, a way to distinguish one group from another at a time when social organization was becoming increasingly complex. Still others propose a more spiritual role, that the alterations were apotropaic, designed to ward off evil or to prepare the dead for the journey into the next world. And yet none of these theories fully account for the specificity of the dental modifications, or for their geographic isolation. While tooth modification has been documented in other parts of ancient Africa and beyond, the Egyptian examples are unusual. They appear primarily in pre-dynastic Upper Egypt, and virtually vanish after the formation of the early dynastic state around 3100 BC. This suggests that the practice was either suppressed, forgotten, or absorbed into other cultural expressions. But why? Could it be that these early practices were tied to a belief system at odds with the one later formalized by the temple priests and royal ideology? A belief system that perhaps did not survive the consolidation of religious and political power in early dynastic Egypt? More speculative voices suggest deeper meanings. Some fringe researchers draw attention to the remarkable dental precision in certain remains, noting that the notching is often symmetrical, requiring controlled and repeated motion. Without modern tools, this would have been difficult, painful, even dangerous. Was this merely aesthetic, Or was there an underlying knowledge guiding the procedure? Even more controversial is the suggestion that some forms of tooth modification may have been associated with sound, that is, with the ability to produce unique vocal resonances or clicks. This idea is difficult to test, but it draws on comparative anthropology, where certain tribal groups use dental modification to enhance or alter speech patterns as part of ritual chanting or invocation. If so, could it be that these pre-dynastic individuals were ritual specialists, proto-priests, or spiritual intermediaries? Of course, there is little direct evidence to support such a claim, but the silence in the archaeological record, the sudden disappearance of the practice, is itself a kind of enigma. Were these individuals ostracized? Was the tradition absorbed and reinterpreted, its meanings lost in the layers of time? Another line of inquiry looks at the possible influence of distant cultures. Could there have been contact, however indirect, between pre-dynastic Egyptians and neighboring regions where body modification was more common or ritualized differently? Across the Red Sea, in early Nubian and Horn of Africa cultures, various forms of scarification and bodily alteration were integral to spiritual identity. Is it possible that these practices shared a common ancestral root? Again, no definitive evidence links them, but the suggestion remains, a thread waiting to be pulled. And then there's the question of why it mattered so much to the dead. If these modifications were painful and possibly dangerous, why were they preserved through burial? Why did these people carry their altered teeth with them into the afterlife? The Egyptians, even in these early periods, believed deeply in the continuation of the soul beyond death. The dead were buried with goods, ornaments, and tokens that might serve them in the next world. If these dental modifications were preserved so deliberately, might they have been seen as keys, access passes to spiritual realms, signs that one had already begun the journey while still alive? And what about the pain itself? Was it part of the rite, a trial to prove worthiness, endurance, or submission to a higher purpose? Across cultures, pain has often served as a bridge between the physical and the sacred. Could the filing of teeth have been a means of transformation, not merely cosmetic but ontological? Or was it something we have yet to imagine? Was this an expression of personal identity or collective memory, a technology of the spirit, or a forgotten science of the flesh? The graves at Nakata remain quiet. The teeth, centuries old, tell no stories aloud. But the questions they leave behind continue to gnaw gently at the edges of our understanding. And in that silence, in that space between the symbolic and the skeletal, there is a mystery. One still buried. One still breathing through the bones of a forgotten people. What secrets lie in the smiles of the ancient dead? And what did they see? What did they believe when they looked into the mirror of ritual pain and carved their identity into enamel? The answers, if they exist, remain somewhere between science and symbol, between the living and the long departed, still waiting to be understood. From the subtle markings left on enamel in early burials, we now lift our gaze to something far more iconic. An image etched not into teeth or bone, but into the very fabric of Egyptian kingship. The image of a ruler, arms crossed over his chest, holding two strange and symbolic objects, the crook and the flail. They are among the most recognized emblems of ancient Egypt, yet their true origins remain shrouded in mystery. Step into the dark, echoing corridors of Abydos, one of Egypt's most sacred cities. Carved deep into the temple walls of Seti Wers, you'll find the pharaoh depicted in relief, stoic, powerful, divine. His hands clutching a crook, shaped like a shepherd's staff, and a flail, a short-handled tool tipped with dangling beads or strands. These two objects, always paired, became inseparable from the identity of the king. But what do they really mean? Where did they come from? And why did they carry such weight across millennia? The conventional interpretation is straightforward. The crook represents kingship as shepherdship, a ruler guiding and protecting his people. The flail is said to symbolize the king's role in discipline or fertility, possibly linked to agricultural functions or divine authority over nature. These ideas are supported by their frequent association with Osiris, the god of the underworld and resurrection, who is often shown holding the crook and flail in crossed arms, like the deceased pharaohs buried beneath stone and sand. But a closer look at these objects, especially their earliest representations, raises more questions than answers. For one, the material origins of the crook and flail are obscure. While later versions were made of gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli or other precious materials, earlier examples are rarely found. In fact, no fully intact pre-dynastic crook or flail has ever been excavated from a secure archaeological context. What we know comes primarily from imagery, reliefs, paintings, tomb art, not physical artifacts. This absence is peculiar. If these tools were essential to royal regalia, used in coronations and funerary rites alike, why are they not found in abundance in early tombs? Why do they seem to appear fully formed in the earliest dynastic periods, without clear transitional prototypes? Could the crook and flail, then, be symbolic constructs that emerged rapidly, deliberately, at a moment when royal power was being redefined? Or were they adopted, possibly borrowed from older, now lost traditions? Some scholars have suggested that the crook may derive from actual shepherds' staffs, used in early pastoral societies that predate dynastic Egypt. In this theory, as tribal leaders emerged, the shepherd's crook evolved from a humble tool to a badge of authority. Similarly, the flail may have started as an agricultural implement, possibly for threshing grain or deterring pests in livestock. Over time, these utilitarian tools were elevated, their mundane origins obscured by royal ceremony and theological overlay. But others see deeper patterns. There are those who note striking parallels between the crook and flail and symbols found in Mesopotamian or Nubian iconography, regions with which Egypt had both contact and tension in early history. Could the flail, with its whip-like strands, echo ritual scourges used in Sumerian kingship rites? Could the crossed arm posture of the ruler, bearing both items, hint at an inherited priest-king archetype that predates Egypt's own pharaohs? Still others look to mythology. In Egyptian texts, particularly from the pyramid and coffin texts, the crook and flail are sometimes invoked in magical or protective contexts. Osiris, as lord of the underworld, is seen not only as a ruler, but as a guardian between life and death. Holding the crook and flail, he becomes a psychopomp, a guide between worlds. Might these objects, then, have served not just royal or symbolic purposes, but ritual functions tied to death, transformation, and resurrection? Could the crook have been a kind of spiritual compass, meant to guide the soul across the perilous terrain of the Duat? Could the flail, with its rhythmic movement, have been used in rites to awaken or purify? And why always together? There is no record in Egyptian tradition of a king holding just one. The crook and flail are never shown apart. It is always the pair, one in each hand, crossed over the chest. This pose, later mimicked by statues and even mummies, is so specific that it seems liturgical, almost like a coded position with layered meaning. Could the duality represent something greater? The balance of mercy and justice? The shepherd's protection in one hand, and the reminder of authority, even violence, in the other? Or might they signify duality in the Egyptian worldview, Upper and Lower Egypt, life and death, heaven and earth? There are even more speculative voices who suggest the crook and flail were not Egyptian at all in their origin. Some point to symbols from prehistoric Saharan rock art, where similar implements appear in scenes whose meanings remain undeciphered. Others link the flail's beaded chords to ritual sound, proposing that the object may have been used not as a whip or grain tool, but as a kind of percussive instrument, its motion producing a rhythmic pattern in temple ceremonies long since lost. And if so, then the image of the pharaoh with crossed arms might not be one of static authority, but of poised action, a ruler about to guide, or to summon something unseen. Of course, we can't say for certain. The crook and flail remain among the most enduring yet least understood symbols of Egyptian kingship. They appear on every royal statue, every funerary stela, every tomb wall for over 2,000 years. And yet, in all that time, no inscription explains precisely why. They are, in a sense, pure icon, recognized, repeated, revered, but never fully revealed. Why did they matter so deeply? Were they simply visual metaphors? Or did they once hold real, sacred function in the hidden rites of the pharaohs? And what might we still uncover, buried beneath sand or sealed behind forgotten walls, that could illuminate their first, original meaning? For now, the crook and flail remain as they always were, crossed in silence across the chest of eternity, guarding a mystery that may be as old as kingship itself. If the crook and flail symbolize divine kingship in the visible world, then the structures raised in the desert to honor the sun reveal a more cosmic ambition, one in which the pharaoh does not merely rule, but communes directly with the heavens. Southwest of modern-day Cairo, in the sandy expanse of Abu Ghurab, lie the weathered remains of one of Egypt's most enigmatic constructions, the solar temple of Sahure. It is not as famous as the pyramids, not as preserved as the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. But what it lacks in grandeur, it makes up for in mystery. Built over 4,400 years ago during the 5th dynasty, this structure was part of a larger group of temples dedicated to Ra, the sun god, whose influence over royal ideology surged during this period. The reign of Sahure, though relatively brief, marked a turning point in Egypt's relationship with the divine. No longer content with monumental tombs alone, Sahure and his successors sought something different. Temples to the sun, open to the sky, echoing the light and rhythms of the cosmos. But what was the true purpose of these temples? Why were they built with such precision? And why has so much about them faded into historical obscurity? Standing on the site today, little remains above ground. Rubble-strewn walls, faded limestone fragments, an open court where sun once poured through. But ancient reliefs, now preserved in museum archives, depict scenes of astronomical alignment, sacred offerings, and processions involving objects whose purpose remains unclear. At the center once stood a massive obelisk, now long destroyed, believed to represent the Benben stone, the mythical first mound that emerged from the primordial waters at the beginning of time. The symbolism here is deliberate. The solar temple was not a house for a god's statue, like other temples. It was not built to be closed and dark, where only priests tread. Instead, it was open, an architectural homage to the sky itself. And that raises an intriguing question. Were these temples observatories as much as they were sanctuaries? Mainstream Egyptologists generally agree that the solar temples of Abu Ghurab, including that of Sahure, were part of a state-sponsored religious revolution. The king was increasingly seen as the son of Ra, and these temples reflected a political shift, one that aligned kingship more closely with cosmic cycles. Yet many aspects of their design remain difficult to explain. Why, for instance, were so few of them built? Only 6 solar temples were reportedly constructed, all within the span of the 5th dynasty. Of these, only 2 have been conclusively identified, Sahure's and that of Nusser. The others have vanished without a trace. Was this a short-lived experiment? Or do their disappearances point to something more deliberate, a loss of knowledge or even a deliberate erasure? Some researchers suggest that the solar temples were aligned with specific astronomical events. The positioning of obelisks, courtyards, and altars might have marked the solstices or equinoxes, functioning not only as places of worship, but as calendrical markers, linking human ritual to celestial time. But if so, the specific alignments are difficult to confirm due to the ruined state of the structures and erosion over thousands of years. Then there's the curious case of the temple's ritual artifacts, some of which defy easy classification. Reliefs show priests carrying large, paddle-shaped objects, decorated with sun disks and intricate etchings. Are these ceremonial fans? Solar icons? Or do they represent something else? Devices with a purpose now forgotten. A more speculative school of thought links the solar temples to energy theories, proposals that suggest the ancient Egyptians understood the sun not just as a deity, but as a source of spiritual or vibrational power. While these ideas often veer into fringe territory, they arise from a legitimate puzzle. Why build vast, resource-intensive complexes in open, exposed areas when Egypt already had a sophisticated religious infrastructure? And why, in particular, do some of the temple remains, such as those from New Sere's temple, a short distance from Sahure's, include stone basins and channels that seem to serve no practical purpose? Some suggest they may have held offerings. Others propose they were part of ritual purifications. But a few wonder whether these features were meant to interact with light or sound, that the movement of the sun itself, passing across the temple, completed a sacred circuit each day. At the heart of Sahure's solar temple lies a metaphor made stone. The sun, not as an abstract god, but as a force physically present, a reality to be courted, harnessed, and revered. This connection between light, kingship, and divine presence seems to echo not only across Egyptian religion, but across time itself. And yet, the mystery endures. The site was abandoned after the 5th dynasty. The solar temples were never revived in the same form. Later, Egyptian rulers focused their divine associations elsewhere, toward Osiris, Amun, and other gods more rooted in the inner sanctuaries of darkness and secrecy. The great experiment with sun temples, so bold, so exposed, vanished into the sand. What changed? Did the rituals lose their meaning? Was there a theological shift? Or was something lost, some key knowledge about the relationship between the heavens and the earth that made these structures essential at one time and obsolete at another? Modern excavations continue to probe beneath the surface. Recent surveys using ground-penetrating radar have revealed subterranean anomalies beneath the Abu Ghurab complex, suggesting there may be chambers or extensions yet to be uncovered. But for now, they remain untouched, locked in earth and silence. What secrets might lie below? What ceremonies once unfolded here, beneath the unfiltered sun, as priests and kings moved in time with shadows and stone? Did the Temple of Sahure reflect knowledge of cosmic rhythms we no longer understand? And if so, is it merely a relic of a forgotten theology, or a message we have yet to decipher? In the shifting desert light of Abu Ghurab, the stones of Sahure's temple seem to wait, not just to be studied, but to be remembered. From the sun temples of Sahure, where divinity was bathed in open sky and stone, we shift now to a darker and more elusive corner of Egypt's royal history. One where identity blurs, records vanish, and even the name is whispered with uncertainty. A figure caught between shadows, known to us only through broken inscriptions, scattered artifacts, and a question that continues to haunt Egyptology. Who was Smenkhkare? In the wind-swept sands near Amarna, the capital city once called Akhetaten, The ruins of a revolutionary reign lie in silence. It was here that Pharaoh Akhenaten, the heretic king, dismantled centuries of religious tradition and built a new world dedicated to the Aten, the solar disk. This city, gleaming white in its day, was meant to be a beacon of divine truth, but it also became the setting for one of the most confusing and enigmatic chapters in royal succession. Somewhere within this strange and short-lived era emerges the name Smenkhkare, a pharaoh who may have ruled for only a year, or perhaps a few. A king whose throne name, Ankh-Keperure, appears suddenly on monuments and then just as quickly disappears. No tomb has ever been conclusively identified. No face has been confirmed. And yet, his presence is undeniable. A ghost at the edge of Egypt's 18th dynasty. But who was he? Some believe Smenkhkare was Akhenaten's co-regent, elevated to share power during the tumultuous final years of the Atenist regime. Others propose he was the immediate successor to Akhenaten, briefly holding the throne before the young Tutankhamun restored the old gods and moved the capital back to Thebes. A few even suggest he may have been Nefertiti herself, ruling in disguise under a male throne name during a transitional period of political instability. This is not idle speculation. The confusion begins in the records themselves. In some inscriptions, Smenkhkare is referred to with masculine titles, beloved of Akhenaten, son of the sun. In others, the throne name Ankh-Keperure appears side by side with epithets usually reserved for queens. The blending of male and female markers has led many to believe we may be looking at two figures, or perhaps a single individual whose identity was deliberately obscured. Why would the Egyptians, a civilization known for obsessive record-keeping and carefully curated royal lineages, allow such ambiguity? Was Smenkhkare a political placeholder, used to stabilize the regime while a power struggle brewed behind the scenes? Or was this confusion a result of something more intentional, a historical erasure? Mainstream Egyptology holds that Smenkhkare likely existed as a short-lived male pharaoh, perhaps a brother or son of Akhenaten. Some inscriptions at Amarna refer to a royal figure named Ankh-Keperure Smenkhkare Djeser Keperu, indicating a distinct person, apart from Tutankhamun or Akhenaten. And yet, the evidence is thin. His name is found primarily on a handful of ring bezels, wine jar labels, and damaged stelae. There is no definitive sarcophagus, no confirmed mummy, no grand funerary complex. But then there's K55. In 1907, archaeologists uncovered a mysterious tomb in the Valley of the Kings, labeled KV55, containing a desecrated coffin, a poorly preserved mummy, and objects bearing the names of several Amarna figures. Initial reports were contradictory. Was it Akhenaten? Smenkhkare? A misidentified burial from another time altogether? Modern forensic analysis has deepened the mystery rather than solved it. The skeleton in KV55 has been dated to a male in his early 20s, too young to be Akhenaten, according to most reconstructions of his reign. Yet the cranial structure and DNA show strong genetic ties to Tutankhamun, suggesting the occupant was a close relative, perhaps even a brother, and that, for many, points to Smenkhkare. But if this is him, why the lack of honor in burial? The coffin was defaced, the inscriptions partially hacked out, the canopic jars mismatched. This was not the interment of a revered pharaoh, but one seemingly erased from memory. Could this have been the work of those who followed? Or Horemheb, rulers who sought to eliminate all trace of the Atenist heresy? Or was Smenkhkare caught in a deeper political rift, his claim to the throne contested, his legacy dismantled before it could take root? Adding to the intrigue are those who maintain that Smenkhkare never existed as a distinct individual at all. They argue that Ankh-Kheperure is merely another throne name of Nefertiti, who may have assumed power after Akhenaten's death and ruled for a short time before passing the throne to Tutankhamun. Support for this theory comes from artistic depictions and inscriptions where Ankh-Kheperure Neferneferuaten, a variation on the name, is clearly tied to feminine grammar and iconography. Was this a deliberate gender concealment, a way to preserve the illusion of masculine kingship in a patriarchal tradition? And if so, what became of the true Smenkhkare? Did he ever exist? This is the heart of the mystery. It is not just a question of missing tombs or faded inscriptions, it is a question of identity, how it was constructed, concealed, and possibly destroyed. Could the story of Smenkhkare reveal cracks in the carefully ordered narrative of ancient Egyptian rule? Could it be a case of dynastic chaos masked by sacred imagery? Or perhaps a more personal story of a ruler born in the wrong moment, swept away by tides too large to resist? Today, the name Smenkhkare survives only in fragments. Tiny rings, a few scarabs, a handful of faded wall carvings. The absence is louder than the evidence. Why was he forgotten? Was he erased, or simply misplaced in the sandstorm of history? And if we were to uncover a sealed tomb in the western hills tomorrow, one bearing the name Ankh-Kheperure, what truths might it finally reveal? In the shifting light of Amarna, where palace stones lie broken and sun disks fade into dust, the shadow of Smenkhkare endures, unclaimed, unnamed, and unresolved. From the obscured reign of Smenkhkare, its identity fractured between myth and history, we journey now to a world far removed from the Nile's embrace. A world of misty wetlands, submerged secrets, and objects as fragile as memory itself. Here, in the damp silence of Denmark's Toland Marsh, we encounter another echo of the ancient past. The discovery of crystalline implements so pristine, so enigmatic, they defy both context and explanation. In the pale dawn light filtering through reeds, Toland Marsh seems at first like any bog, waterlogged, silent, timeless. The ground squelches underfoot, and each breath carries an earthy stillness. But it is what lies below that holds the mystery. Beneath layers of peat and centuries of decay, peat diggers have long uncovered bodies. Bog bodies, remarkably preserved by the swamp's cold embrace. Yet, among the human remains, they have also found something entirely unexpected. Crystalline shafts, blades, and points, objects crafted with precision and clarity unlike anything associated with Iron Age Europe. These crystal shards are not conveniently broken fragments. They appear deliberately worked. Polished edges catch the light, suggesting intentional design. Some are embedded with incisions, akin to etchings or symbols, too regular to be random. Their glassy appearance, translucent and sharp, is not of local quartz, but resembles rock crystal, a pristine form of clear quartz prized in antiquity. How did these objects end up here, among bodies that date from approximately 400 BC to 200 AD, long before any documented trade in rock crystal to this region? Mainstream interpretations suggest crystal might have arrived through itinerant trade networks. After all, quartz deposits do exist in Europe, and crystal was valued for its clarity and associations with purity. But the quality of these tools and the context raises questions. Were they simply decorative amulets, included as grave goods? Or did they serve a functional purpose, tools, ritual implements, or symbolic devices? Some researchers propose that the crystal pieces were part of cognitive or shamanic practices, perhaps used in rituals of vision, healing, or trance. The clarity of the crystal when held to light or submerged in water might reveal visions or illuminate the mysteries of the past. Could they have been used to focus chants, create sonic resonance, or even channel light in low-lit ceremonies? Fringe theories go further. Some have speculated that the presence of crystal in such an unassuming marsh hints at ancient knowledge of optics, that the bog dwellers recognized the unique properties of the stone. Others suggest ceremonial burial sites, where the tools were placed not out of practicality, but for symbolic protection of the dead. Mirrors lit by candle shavings, guiding spirits through the darkness. Even more provocative is the idea that these items may not have originated locally at all. Could they be relics of long-range contact, brought from Mediterranean or even Bronze Age trading routes? Crystal was prized in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and even as far as Indus Valley civilizations. What if a shard of knowledge, an artifact of a trade caravan or early explorer, somehow found its resting place alongside a Toland bog sacrifice? These questions deepen when we consider the placement of the crystal among the bog bodies themselves. Are the artifacts found clutched in a hand, lying next to a leg, embedded in the peat some distance from remains, as though they were offerings? The distribution is varied and suggests that these stones were not casually dropped, but placed with intent. Of course, scientific caution is warranted. The peat is undisturbed, but once removed, items are subject to contamination, misplacement, merging with other deposits. Yet some of the crystal pieces have been carbon dated using micro-residue found on their surfaces, residue that suggests deposition contemporaneous with the bodies themselves. Were the crystal items part of a funerary tradition, buried to guide the dead? Or were they tools of healing, ceremony, or arcane craft left behind in silence, interpreted only by the earth? In the stillness of the marsh, under the gaze of crows and reeds, evidence is scarce, and thus powerful. A shard of rock, clear as glass, the carved faint marks catching the dawn. Here is the echo of a thought, a practice, a belief, lost to written record, preserved only in crystal and clay. Could the crystal implements of Toland Marsh be evidence of spiritual traditions unrecorded by ancient scribes? Were they ritual instruments, mirrors of soul and spirit, or the literal tools of everyday life in a world we scarcely understand? And if they came from distant lands, what secret cultures or trade networks once reached this misted landscape, leaving behind fragments of a truth we are only beginning to see? The crystal stands clear through mud and time, silent, reflective, waiting for someone to look past the surface, even deeper than the water, to find what lies beneath. From the misted crystals of Toland Marsh to the sands of Egypt, our journey through the unexplained circles back to a royal landscape, one more obscured than its better-known neighbors. After centuries of neglect and ruin, the desert now holds a secret once lost to time. The Pyramid of Djedefre, a monument of silence and mystery, its stone fractured, its purpose debated, its presence haunting the western desert. Located roughly 6 miles south of Giza, the Pyramid of Djedefre stands apart in both distance and design. Unlike the towering perfection of Khufu's Great Pyramid, Djedefre's monument, built around 2566 BC for the son of Khufu, was left unfinished. Its limestone casing stripped away long ago, its core now exposed as crumbling blocks beneath a wind-blown plateau. The enclosure walls have all but disappeared, and the causeway that once linked the pyramid to the Nile has been buried by centuries of sand. Yet even in its ruin, there is a presence, a promise of something unordinary. Djedefre, also spelled Rajadef, chose to situate his pyramid at Abu Rawash, perhaps signaling a break from family tradition, but possibly reflecting another motive altogether. To place his tomb on a natural rise overlooking the desert, a ridge that might have been seen as sacred, elevated, even cosmic. Some scholars suggest the location offered an astronomical alignment, echoing solar connections or correspondences with the royal horizon lines. To others, it appears as deliberate isolation, a pharaoh choosing distance over proximity, identity over inheritance. There is also the question of shape. Some Egyptologists have posited that Djedefre's pyramid may never have been meant to be perfectly smooth. The rough core, thought to be unfinished, could have been intentional, an early prototype of the radical fluted design his successors would later refine. Was Djedefre, in this light, an architectural visionary, or a revolutionary undone? Within the pyramid, exploration has often been thwarted by modern hazards. Flooded shafts, collapsed passageways, and undocumented early excavations have obscured the interior. Yet surviving documentation and recent geophysical surveys indicate it once had a unique internal layout. Shafts diverging at odd angles, visitor chambers misaligned with the pyramid's center axis. To many, this implies careless execution, but to others, a cipher, a secret way through stone. Then there is the central sarcophagus, long robbed, long empty. But fragments of plaster, traces of red paint, and faint hieratic inscriptions remain. They speak not just of a king, but of rituals and words now nearly washed away by time's sands. This brings us to the heart of the mystery. Why was Djedefre's pyramid abandoned? After only completing the core, the casing was never added. His causeway remained buried. His mortuary temple vanished. Was it a death interrupted? A reign cut short by a sudden demise or internal politics? Or was it something less earthly? A pharaoh disenfranchised, deemed heretic, his memory erased faster than stone could decay. Indeed, Djedefre's name was omitted from some ancient king lists, a rare erasure. In a culture obsessed with the afterlife's permanence, why would a king's name be struck from memory? Some suggest his religious policies, perhaps a solar emphasis more extreme than his father's, led to intentional suppression. Others propose internal power struggles, rival branches of the royal family disavowing his lineage. More speculative minds have proposed even bolder possibilities. Djedefre as a would-be reformer, whose architectural deviations were part of a hidden doctrine. Perhaps the fluted core was to be covered in reflective copper or solar metal sheeting, a pyramid meant to glow at sunrise, a solar altar visible across the desert. Or perhaps his buried passages concealed celestial chambers, for initiatory rites seldom seen again after a single regenerate reign. Archaeologists, ever cautious, point out that many of these ideas remain unproven. The lack of pottery and burial goods in undisturbed contexts makes ritual interpretation difficult. And yet, the pyramid's silence speaks. It does not simply stand incomplete. It stands apart, questioning everything laid out at Giza. It asks us to look again at what we think a pyramid is, or must be. Did Djedefre intend to break the mold, or did he fail in the attempt? Was the abandonment of his pyramid a collapse in power, or the deliberate surrender of a larger plan? And in the shifting winds of Abu Rawash, what secrets remain, buried beneath the broken masonry, waiting for us to remember how to listen again? The Pyramid of Djedefre is an echo in stone, still unfinished, and perhaps still incomplete. But in that echo, there may lie a question even older than Egypt's dynasties. What happens when a king dares to rewrite the rules of eternity? As the fragmented Pyramid of Djedefre fades behind layers of sand and time, we turn deeper into the tombs themselves. Not the grand pyramids rising under the sun, but the quieter chambers carved into stone. These are spaces meant for eternity, etched with spells, names, and offerings to guide the spirit beyond. And within these sanctuaries of the dead, one feature appears again and again, almost obsessively: the so-called false door. Cut into smooth limestone walls, framed with hieroglyphs and surrounded by scenes of feasting, labor, and divine judgment. These doors are visually striking, yet eerily unfunctional. They do not open. They do not lead anywhere. And yet, to the ancient Egyptians, they were portals, passageways between the worlds of the living and the dead. One such door lies deep within the mastaba of Mereruka at Saqqara, a masterwork of Old Kingdom craftsmanship. It stands tall and silent, its surface chiseled with the image of the deceased himself, seated, regal, and forever facing outward. Above him, inscriptions beckon offerings: bread, beer, meat, linen, not for display, but for sustenance. It was believed that through this door, the Kai, the vital life force of the departed, could emerge to accept these gifts. This concept is well documented. Egyptologists agree that the false door was more than symbolic. It functioned as a ritual interface between dimensions, a liminal space where the physical world met the metaphysical. Priests and family members would leave offerings, say prayers, and perform rites directly in front of the door, believing the deceased could pass through unseen. But here is where the mystery deepens. Why do some tombs contain multiple false doors, sometimes arranged with geometrical precision, sometimes seemingly redundant? Why do certain doors bear inscriptions in cryptic or reversed hieroglyphs, as if designed to be read not by the living, but by some other consciousness? And why, in some cases, are these doors hidden entirely, located not in ceremonial chambers, but deep within passageways or sealed behind unmarked walls? Some scholars suggest that the proliferation of false doors reflects architectural trends and evolving religious beliefs. Others believe they served more complex purposes, not just allowing the spirit to enter, but controlling its movement, channeling it to specific parts of the tomb where rituals could be performed more effectively. There are even examples of doors that appear to have been intentionally misaligned, placed at skewed angles or unusually high on walls. Could these have represented shifts in cosmological thinking? Or did they serve as safeguards, symbolic locks to confuse or deter malevolent forces from following the soul into the afterlife? Fringe theorists have offered more provocative suggestions. Some propose that false doors reflect an ancient, lost understanding of energetic portals, a form of spiritual technology capable of facilitating dimensional travel. According to this line of thought, the doors were not merely metaphors, but literal gateways, conduits built with precise angles, stone resonances, and inscriptions to interact with forces unknown to modern science. One often cited example is the false door of Imhotep, a vizier during the 5th dynasty, also buried at Saqqara. His tomb contains a door so finely carved that its central niche appears to recede infinitely inwards, creating a strange optical illusion. Stand in the presence of such a feature, and one feels not simply that they're facing a carving, but that something might, at any moment, step through it. Could these optical effects have been deliberate? Were they designed not only to impress, but to evoke altered states, drawing visitors into a deeper awareness of death and divinity? Another compelling case lies in the Valley of the Kings, where researchers discovered a blocked chamber with an unfinished false door, completely devoid of decoration. No name, no offerings, no images. A blank doorway in the darkness. Why would such a door exist? Was it meant for someone unnamed, or something unnameable? Even in modern times, strange acoustic properties have been noted in some tombs that feature false doors. Whispered words seem to echo softly, as though the chamber is listening. Could this be mere architecture? Or did the ancient builders understand more about how sound and stone interact, how vibration might activate sacred space? While mainstream archaeologists approach these ideas with caution, they rarely dismiss the intensity of belief held by the tomb's creators. For the ancient Egyptians, the afterlife was not a metaphor. It was real, tangible and meticulously engineered. Every feature of a tomb, its orientation, decoration, and even non-functional elements like false doors, played a role in preparing the soul for eternity. But still, questions remain. Why did the concept of the false door endure for thousands of years, appearing in dynasties long after earlier architectural practices had faded? Why did it retain its form, always a narrow niche, always centrally placed, always flanked by offerings, even as language, religion, and politics evolved? And what of the few rare cases where doors seem to have been intentionally damaged? Were these acts of desecration or rituals of release? As we continue to walk the corridors of the ancient dead, the false doors remain closed. Not because they were never meant to open, but perhaps because we have not yet learned how to open them, how to see as the ancients saw, and to think not just of death as an end, but of passage as a form of transformation. Could it be that the dead still walk through these doors, just not in ways we understand? And if that's true, what might they see when they step through from their side? The stone remains silent. But silence, too, has meaning. And in that silence, the mystery of the false doors endures. From the false doors that seem to whisper between worlds, we now step out beneath the open sky, into the silence of stone courtyards and the long shadows of ancient walls. A landscape unlike any other in Egypt unfolds before us, vast, sun-bleached, and scattered with time-worn structures that seem almost too numerous to count. This is Saqqara, and here, stretching westward from the iconic step pyramid of Djedefre, lie the mastaba fields, low, rectangular tombs made of mud brick and limestone, their flat tops and sloping sides evoking more permanence than grandeur. At first glance, they may seem modest, but look closer. Each mastaba, though weathered, tells a story in its own language. Chisel marks in stone, painted fragments of ritual scenes, faded hieroglyphs still clinging to subterranean walls. This field, this necropolis, is one of the oldest and most densely packed in Egypt, a place where layers of history rise and fall like tides in the desert. The mastabas date as far back as the First Dynasty, some over 5,000 years old, and they were used for centuries thereafter. Their layout appears methodical, organized in rows, often aligned with celestial or cardinal references. Beneath their simple exteriors lie complex underground chambers, shafts, and hidden passageways. Tombs of officials, nobles, priests, and artisans, all buried within walking distance of kings. Why here? Why Saqqara? The answer may lie in the nature of the site itself. Saqqara served not only as a burial ground for the nearby city of Memphis, but as a ritual landscape, a place where the worlds of the living and the dead overlapped. The presence of the step pyramid, built by the architect Imhotep for Pharaoh Djoser in the 27th century BC, only heightened its sacred character. The pyramid itself became a focal point around which an entire symbolic geography formed, a geography still being decoded. Yet among the mastabas, questions multiply. Some tombs are elaborate, with deep burial shafts leading to multi-room chambers carved in perfect symmetry. Others are crude, unfinished, or entirely empty. What accounts for this disparity? Was it social status, sudden death, interrupted construction, or something else? And why, in a place so meticulously planned, do we find tombs that seem to overlap, built on top of or next to earlier structures without regard for orientation or symmetry? In some areas, it's as if the layout was rearranged mid-construction, as though guided by shifting priorities or hidden knowledge. One particularly puzzling example is the Mastaba of Ti, a well-preserved tomb from the 5th Dynasty. Its reliefs are stunning, scenes of daily life rendered in remarkable detail: agriculture, fishing, animal husbandry, music, ritual. Yet, below its surface lies a hidden shaft that descends into chambers not visible in the original architectural plan. Were these later additions, or intentionally concealed from the start? And T was not a pharaoh. He was an overseer, a high-ranking official, but not royalty. So why does his tomb rival some royal structures in complexity and symbolism? Could certain individuals have held spiritual or technological knowledge now lost to us? Other mastabas, such as those attributed to Mereruka or Kagemni, also possess features that seem, by modern eyes, unexpectedly advanced. Air shafts, acoustic chambers, and bas-reliefs that depict not just ritual acts but possible astronomical knowledge, such as star patterns or solar alignments. Are we simply reading too much into ancient art? Or did the designers encode knowledge within stone, knowing it would outlast papyrus? In more speculative circles, some researchers have proposed that the mastaba fields serve as part of a larger energetic grid, a subtle design that reflects principles of sacred geometry. When plotted from above, the alignment of certain mastabas appears to follow mathematical relationships, ratios and angles that seem intentional rather than accidental. A few go even further. They argue that the mastabas, particularly the oldest ones, might mark nodes of a system that once channeled or contained unseen energies. Whether electromagnetic, acoustic, or symbolic, the theory suggests that these tombs were not just burial chambers but instruments, each tuned to a function long forgotten. There is, of course, no consensus on these ideas. Most archaeologists prefer more grounded interpretations, that the variety in tomb design reflects shifts in power, economics, or evolving funerary customs. But even the mainstream acknowledges that many mastabas remain unexcavated. Buried beneath sand and sediment, they wait, mute, sealed, and undisturbed for millennia. And what might lie within them? Gold? Perhaps. But more importantly, perhaps information. Inscriptions, scrolls, ritual objects, or architectural blueprints that could reshape our understanding of how early Egyptian civilization developed, how their religious practices evolved, and what they truly believed about the boundaries between life and death. But here's another question. Why, despite over a century of exploration, have so many mastabas yielded so little? In some cases, entire burial chambers are found completely empty. No remains, no artifacts, just blank walls and sealed corridors. Were they looted in antiquity? Were the bodies moved? Or were some of these tombs never meant to be occupied? Could they have been symbolic placeholders, or part of rituals we no longer comprehend? One particularly haunting example is Mastaba 3504, an early tomb whose walls show no decoration and whose burial chamber contains only a large, unmarked stone box. No bones, no grave goods, just silence. Some believe the box once held a body now long vanished. Others think it may have been deliberately left empty, its purpose purely spiritual or perhaps even initiatory. And that leads us to one final curiosity. Many mastabas contain shaft tombs, deep vertical descents that drop down into the earth like inverse pyramids. Some extend for over 100 feet. Why go to such lengths, literally, to bury the dead? What was so important about placing a body at such depth? Were these simply measures to deter grave robbers? Or did the ancients believe that proximity to the Earth's core brought the soul closer to rebirth? As the desert sun casts long shadows across the mastaba fields, the answers remain hidden beneath layers of time and stone. With every excavation, more questions emerge, more patterns, more silence. Are we overlooking a deeper design? A message inscribed not in words, but in layout, light, and stone. The mastabas of Saqqara do not speak, but they are not silent either. They wait, still, watching. perhaps holding secrets not just of the past, but of what we have yet to understand. As we leave the windswept necropolis of Saqqara behind, we travel deeper, beyond stone tombs and funerary rites, into the very origin of what we call ancient Egypt. A journey not into ruins, but into the moment before there were temples, before there were pharaohs, before Egypt was Egypt. We find ourselves at the edge of the Nile, not in the familiar grandeur of Thebes or Memphis, but farther south, in Upper Egypt. Here, at sites like Hierakonpolis, Abydos, and Nakada, the desert encroaches against narrow strips of green, the fertile banks that nurtured early life. The sun rises over dry hills and ancient riverbeds, the air heavy with the scent of dust and water. These lands cradle the relics of something elusive, something that has puzzled historians and archaeologists for over a century: the abrupt emergence of dynastic civilization around 3100 BC. Before this threshold moment, we see only fragments, pottery shards, rudimentary settlements, simple burials. And then, as if overnight, there is structure: writing, monumental art, hierarchies, religion, a complex state ruled by kings who declared themselves gods. How? This is one of Egyptology's most haunting questions. How did a loosely connected group of small Neolithic communities, scattered along the Nile, become a unified kingdom with centralized power, divine rulership, and cultural sophistication seemingly unmatched for its time? The conventional view suggests a slow coalescence over centuries of tribal societies into regional polities, culminating in a legendary figure, Narmer, also known as Menez. His name is immortalized on the Narmer palette, a flat ceremonial object carved from siltstone discovered at Hierakonpolis. It depicts a king, crowned, dominant, subduing enemies, and uniting the two lands of Upper and Lower Egypt. But was it truly that simple? Archaeological evidence paints a more complex picture. Long before Narmer, the pre-dynastic cultures of Nakada II and III were already showing signs of remarkable advancement. Elaborate grave goods, skilled metallurgy, and artistic expression appear with surprising maturity. Some tombs, such as those at Abydos, contain not only finely made jewelry and tools, but symbolic representations of power and belief. And then, suddenly, almost inexplicably, hieroglyphic writing appears, not in gradual evolution from earlier pictographs, but as a sophisticated symbolic system with internal logic and grammar. How does such a language system seem to arrive already formed? One theory proposes cultural diffusion. Perhaps Egypt was not as isolated as once believed. Could influences from Mesopotamia, another riverine cradle of civilization, have crossed through Sinai or the Red Sea corridor, bringing technological and ideological catalysts? There are tantalizing similarities: cylinder seals, motifs of kingship, architectural forms. Yet there is no direct Mesopotamian settlement in early Egypt. No signs of conquest or migration, just a shared echo of complexity, different cultures rising with different tools, yet strangely parallel goals. Some scholars turn inward for explanation. They suggest that the Nile itself, predictable in its flooding, abundant in its resources, may have been the engine of this acceleration. That from this river's steady rhythm emerged a culture obsessed with order, harmony, and cosmic balance, principles that would later be embodied in the concept of Ma'at. But even here, mystery lingers. The first true Egyptian cities, like Thinis and Nekhen, appear as administrative centers with elite structures, ritual enclosures, and storage systems, suggesting a command economy. But where are the intermediate steps? Where is the archaeological trail of gradual civic growth? Was there a precursor city lost beneath layers of Nile silt or desert sands? One of the most debated topics is the tomb Uj, found at Abydos in the royal cemetery of el-Ka'ab. Believed to date to around 3200 BC, it is attributed to a proto-ruler sometimes called Scorpion Waz. Within this tomb were hundreds of imported vessels, bone tags with what some argue are the earliest forms of hieroglyphs, and evidence of centralized control over trade and resources. Who was Scorpion Y? Was he the first pharaoh in all but name? And if so, what system supported his authority? Some researchers have proposed that ancient Egypt may have experienced a knowledge transfer, an infusion of advanced techniques, whether astronomical, architectural, or administrative, from a now lost civilization. These are not fringe ideas born from fantasy, but serious questions raised by the gaps in the archaeological record. Consider the calendar systems, the alignment of structures to solstices, the use of sacred geometry in burial sites. These are not hallmarks of trial and error, but of precision. Others look beyond the physical to the symbolic. The rise of dynastic Egypt was not merely political, it was mythological. The king became the Horus, the living embodiment of divine rule. Tombs became not just graves, but vessels of resurrection. The cosmos was mapped onto the earth, and every ritual reenacted the birth of order from chaos. Where did this theology come from? Was it dreamed into being by early priesthoods, or inherited from something older than memory? The lack of transitional artifacts between pre-dynastic and dynastic periods suggests either a gap in discovery or a leap not yet understood. As if a curtain fell between two acts, and when it rose, the stage was entirely transformed. What we know is this. By 3000 BC, Egypt had become something wholly unique. A nation unified from Aswan to the Delta, speaking one language, venerating a shared pantheon, ruled by a monarch who walked both the earth and the stars. And yet, the bones of that transformation remain only partly uncovered. In recent years, ground-penetrating radar and satellite imaging have hinted at anomalies beneath the Nile floodplain, structures, enclosures, even entire settlements still buried. Could they hold the missing links? Or will they only deepen the enigma? And so we are left with a paradox. The rise of dynastic Egypt is one of the most well-documented events in antiquity, yet also one of the least understood. Was it a natural progression, a spark of genius, or something else entirely, something still waiting to be revealed beneath the sands? The story of Egypt's beginning is not written solely in stone. It pulses in the gaps between facts, in the symbols etched into ancient palettes, and in the questions that outlive each answer.